She walked in smelling like someone else's perfume. Not hers. Not floral. Not soft. Sharp. Spicy. Male. Jack sat at the end of the oak table, the same spot he'd claimed every evening for the past 37 years. Across from him, a cold plate of overcooked salmon, some asparagus, and a lemon wedge that had begun to sweat. He hadn't touched it. Not because he wasn't hungry, but because time had started tasting bitter lately. The grandfather clock behind him clicked once, 10:06 p.m. Dana had promised she'd be home by 8. No call. No message. Just laughter, echoing in from the front door as it slammed shut, and she stumbled in, heels clacking, voice chirping into her phone. "Oh my God, stop it. You're awful," she giggled. "No, seriously, he's probably already asleep. I'll talk to you tomorrow." She saw Jack. "Oh hey, babe," she said, her tone shifting just enough to make his stomach flip. "Sorry, work dinner ran late. You know how these clients are. Wine, small talk, big egos." He said nothing. Not a word. Just watched her glide over in her black blazer, skin glowing too much for someone who'd allegedly been talking accounting over lamb chops. She leaned down and kissed his forehead, the kind of kiss you'd give a distant uncle at a funeral. No warmth. No lips. Just air and the faint trace of aftershave that definitely didn't belong to him. "Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness." Dana turned toward the hallway. "You didn't have to wait up. That looks, well, cold." She gave a rehearsed smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'll be quick in the shower." The bathroom door clicked shut. Jack reached into his cardigan pocket and gently pressed stop on the slim black recorder he'd placed there an hour ago. He didn't need it tonight. He already had the real one. The actual recording device, the one Dana didn't know existed, had been living in the underseat compartment of her Volvo for the past 9 days. Wired through the rear lighter. Voice activated. Invisible. Just like him, lately. What had started as a suspicion had grown teeth. It wasn't the missed dinners or the sudden mandatory trips to Napa. Not even the phone turned face down on the nightstand or the laughter that stopped the second he walked into her room. It was the quiet rearrangement of her presence. Dana had stopped being with him a long time ago. He just hadn't noticed she left. Until now. He stared at the bathroom door, steam starting to curl out from under the frame. The first time he'd listened to the recordings, it had taken everything in him not to vomit. The laughter. The giggles. The coy, whispered, "You make me feel alive again." Someone else's voice, male, confident, telling her, "He's clueless, Dana. He still thinks he matters." Jack hadn't confronted her. Not yet. Instead, he made a spreadsheet. Labeled every clip by date and duration. Noted which restaurant was mentioned. Cross-referenced the ambient sounds, music, traffic, even the server's accents to narrow down locations. He started eating lunch in his car with noise cancellation headphones, running her voice through free enhancement software like he was editing a podcast from hell. His hands never shook. He didn't drink. Didn't rage. Just observed. Because Dana didn't understand something vital about Jack. He had built skyscrapers from blueprints and raw math. Managed 40-man crews on tight deadlines and freezing rain. Balanced safety budgets to the cent while planning around idiot foremen and union drama. If there was one thing Jack could do, truly do, it was plan. The sound of the shower stopped. Jack stood up, took the untouched plate to the sink, scraped it off, rinsed it, and left it in the drying rack. Routine kept him calm. As he passed the living room, he looked at the framed photo on the wall, Dana and him on their 25th anniversary in Maui. She looked happy, or at least, good at looking happy. He wondered now how long that performance had been running. He reached into the drawer under the TV, pulled out a leather-bound journal, and added one line in neat, small print. March 5th, laughing into phone. Home 10:06 p.m. Smells like Tom Ford and more extreme. He capped the pen, slid the journal back in, and went to bed. The recorder in her car would reset at midnight. The memory card was almost full. Good. That meant tomorrow might be the day she said his name. The other man. The voice he still hadn't confirmed. He didn't want to guess. He wanted the truth to hand him the blade. The house had gone still, the way only old houses do when the walls know better than to interrupt. Jack sat on the couch with his laptop open, the glow of the screen making the lines in his face look deeper than they were. One earbud in, one out. In the silence, he listened to her voice. Not the version she used for him, but the one meant for someone else. Higher, breathier, artificially sweet, like cotton candy soaked in gin. "You're so bad." Dana giggled in the recording, then gasped. Something rustled. Fabric? Her laugh followed, lower this time. "Jack's probably watching golf or asleep on the couch again." A man's voice. "Let him. You deserve better." Then the sound of a kiss. Wet. Eager. Too long. Jack paused the playback and exhaled slowly through his nose. Not angry. Not shocked. Something colder. Something measured. The cursor blinked on a spreadsheet next to the audio player. It was already color-coded. Green for confirmed location references, yellow for emotional cues, red for physical contact. He highlighted the timestamp, 1748 to 1815, approximate kiss and probable physical escalation. Laughter before and after. He added a note beside it. Dinner, likely Cielos. Confirm with ambient jazz track in background. Jack wasn't a tech guy. He didn't grow up with apps and cloud storage and enhancement filters. But retirement had left him with time. More than Dana realized. Enough to watch tutorials on noise isolation software. Enough to learn how to clean up audio with EQ settings and normalize voice levels without distorting them. He taught himself just enough to understand that beneath the murmur of freeway noise and clinking glasses, her betrayal had structure. And structure could be studied. He reached for the planner she kept in the kitchen drawer, the one she thought he never looked at. On February 28th, she had scribbled "Client Happy Hour at Bluefin, 6 p.m. The audio from that day? Heavy waves crashing, faint reggae music, and her whispering, "Can't keep my hands off you." He pulled up a review of Bluefin Grill in Marina Bay. Beachfront patio. Steel Drum Live Band on Wednesdays. Bingo. He copied the day's entry and pasted it into the timeline. It wasn't just revenge he was after, it was clarity. Dana had spent months feeding him half-truths marinated in pity. He had stopped believing the lies the moment she started explaining before he asked. Back in the early days, when they were young and broke and eating noodles in a rental with a cracked ceiling, Dana didn't explain a damn thing. She didn't have to. They trusted each other. Now, she came home with stories already pre-polished, too detailed, too rehearsed. Jack had heard better improv from kids at the state fair. He clicked back into the cloud backup folder he'd started years ago, out of habit, not paranoia. The home security cam had been syncing to the cloud for years. Dana never asked where the files went. He pulled up the footage from last month, February 18th. She left at 6:41 p.m., heels in hand, makeup fresh. That night she'd said she had a late Zoom. The audio from her car? "Alan says I look killer in this dress. Should I keep it on or give him the surprise early?" His finger hovered on pause. Alan. There it was. A name. Jack didn't blink. He didn't replay it. He simply highlighted it red in the log, then got up, crossed to the home office, and opened the drawer where he'd kept their tax returns, property deeds, and insurance policies for the last 2 decades. One by one, he began scanning documents into a separate folder, not labeled divorce. Too obvious. He called it Q1 Charitable Deductions. At work the next day, while his old crew ran site checks and processed bids, Jack sat in his truck with his lunch unopened. Instead, he downloaded a trial version of a paid audio suite, ran the latest clip through a low-pass filter, and boosted the 2 kilohertz range. Dana's giggle sharpened. Alan's voice cleared. He said something about the conference in Seattle next month and booking that suite again. Again. Seattle wasn't on her calendar. Jack made a note. That night, when Dana walked in around 8:30, early for her new standards, she brought Thai food and kissed his cheek like she was a loving wife in a sitcom. "I thought we could eat together tonight," she said brightly. Jack smiled and nodded, took the container from her hand, and set the table. He didn't flinch when she joked. "You'd think after all these years I'd know your order, huh?" He didn't respond when she casually mentioned, "Oh, and I might have to fly out next week. Short trip. Seattle. Just one night." Jack didn't even look up. He just said, "You've been working a lot lately," and took a slow bite of pad CEW. Dana smiled. Relieved. Too relieved. That night, once she was asleep, Jack added another row to the spreadsheet. March 6th, confirmed name, Alan. Seattle trip recurring. Possible second location for recordings. He closed the laptop, stood in the doorway of their bedroom, and watched her chest rise and fall. To her, he was still the aging, gullible husband who warmed leftovers and folded laundry while she networked. To Jack, she was a math problem, and soon, he'd be solving for X. Alan. The name rang in Jack's ears like the slow chime of a church bell before a funeral. He didn't need a last name. He didn't need to Google it or search Dana's contacts or read any emails. Alan was the head of sales. He remembered him from the annual holiday party 3 years ago, the one Jack almost skipped. But Dana had insisted. "You'll like him," she'd said with just a hint too much enthusiasm. "He's sharp. Knows how to charm a room." Jack remembered the handshake. Alan's grip was too firm, like he was trying to prove something. He wore a tie with tiny yachts on it and told a story about closing a deal in Cabo while drunk on mezcal. His wife had been there too, quiet, polite, nervous. She drank club soda all night and checked her phone every 10 minutes. Back then, Jack had laughed at Alan's jokes, smiled when Dana introduced him. No? He replayed that night in his mind like a crime scene. Alan, a man with 2 daughters. Married. The upstanding face of Dana's firm. He wasn't just a name anymore. He was a target. But Jack didn't rage. He didn't slam drawers or break dishes. He didn't ask Dana about her trip to Seattle or what exactly had made her smell like another man's cologne. Instead, he made an appointment. The law firm was in a business park off the highway, tucked between a dentist and a financial advisor. Clean, forgettable. Just what he needed. The receptionist didn't even blink when Jack asked for a private consultation about asset restructuring. She handed him a clipboard and a bottle of water. The lawyer was younger than Jack expected. Early 40s, lean, with hair too perfect to be natural. His name was Wyatt Granger, and his eyes narrowed just a fraction when Jack opened with, "I'm not filing for divorce. Yet. I'm planning for clarity." Wyatt leaned back. "Clarity?" Jack nodded. "I want to move some things. Just in case." By the end of the hour, Jack had created 2 irrevocable trusts. One for the lake cabin, one for the house. Both in the names of his sister's kids, contingent on his death, of course, but stripped from joint marital property classification. Legally, the cabin was no longer his, and neither was the house. Not technically. Not anymore. Next came the accounts. The joint savings was split, half moved to a newly created LLC called Sunward Strategies, named after a hiking trail Jack once loved as a kid. It was registered out of state. Dana's name? Nowhere on the paperwork. Not even in the shadows. Jack knew she'd never notice. She hadn't logged into their accounts in over 2 years, everything auto-drafted. Mortgage, utilities, credit cards. She only noticed the money when it was gone. He called the life insurance rep next. "Just updating beneficiaries," he said casually. "Make sure everything's current." By the following Friday, Dana still hadn't said Alan's name out loud. But Jack didn't need her to. He had 3 recordings now with Alan's voice. One in the car, one in a restaurant bathroom, and the most recent, a phone call. That one stung more than the others. "I wish I could just wake up next to you," Dana whispered. Alan replied, "One more trip, baby. Then we figure it out." Jack saved that file under the folder, Exit Strategy. But this wasn't just about the affair anymore. This was about the performance. Dana hadn't just betrayed him. She had rewritten the story of their marriage without telling him. At dinner that weekend, she wore red lipstick for the first time in years. "Do you like it?" she asked. Jack smiled. "It's different. Bold." She beamed, twisting spaghetti onto her fork. "I just felt like trying something fun." Jack nodded, sipping wine he didn't even taste. Bold. That's what she thought she was. Clever, maybe. Slick enough to cheat under his nose and still sit across from him, winking like nothing burned under the surface. That night, he logged into her LinkedIn account, password, Sunset23. Predictable. He downloaded her entire network and flagged Alan's wife's profile. Quiet. Underposted. A digital ghost. She hadn't shared a photo in 6 months. Jack wondered how long she'd been suspecting to. He clicked through photos of Alan's daughters, mid-20s, law school, dog rescue volunteer work. Happy. Clueless. Jack didn't want to break anyone's world. He just wanted the chessboard reset before the other players even realized the clock had started. That Sunday morning, Dana came down in workout clothes, kissed him on the cheek, and said, "Going to spin class with the girls." Jack nodded, folding the paper. She smelled like sandalwood and guilt. As soon as the door closed, he walked to the garage, opened the small locked box beneath his workbench, and took out a backup drive. He copied every recording, every transcript, every financial changelog. Then he tucked it into a manila folder labeled Project Allen. Because that's what this had become now. Not revenge. Not heartbreak. A project. And Jack had always finished his projects. It was a Wednesday morning when Jack messaged her. Not a call, not a confrontation, just a single, quiet message from a burner number he'd bought at a gas station the day before. "I believe we share a problem." No threats. No drama. Just one question. Would you like to hear his voice when he thinks no one's listening? He didn't expect a reply right away. He knew how it must have landed, like a cold gust through an open window in January. But 36 minutes later, his phone buzzed once. Where? They met 2 days later at a park neither of them had any emotional connection to. Neutral ground. No cafes, no familiar benches. Jack chose a place near the train tracks, loud enough to drown emotions, quiet enough to speak truth. It was just past noon. Overcast sky, brittle wind. Spring trying to crawl out of winter's coffin. She was already there when Jack arrived. Same woman he remembered from that holiday party, shoulders too tight, smile too soft. Her name was Claire. She stood near the picnic table with a thermos and red eyes. No makeup. No rings. Jack sat across from her, placed the recorder on the table, and said, "I won't send you anything. I won't keep copies. You'll hear it, and that'll be it. I'm not here to hurt you." Claire looked at him. "I already hurt." He pressed play. Dana's voice came first, sharp, teasing, too comfortable. "You should have seen his face this morning. He still thinks I'm flying out to meet a supplier." Then Alan's voice. "Let him. He's probably planning dinner like a good little husband." They both laughed. Then silence. Claire's hands started shaking. Not from surprise. From confirmation. She didn't say a word, didn't cry. Just closed her eyes and whispered, "I knew it. I just didn't want to know it." Jack paused the recording. "There's more," he said quietly. "But that's enough for now." Claire nodded. "Why are you doing this like this?" Quietly. "No lawyers. No blow up." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Because she thinks I'm stupid. And I want her to keep thinking that for now." They sat in silence for a while, both staring at a squirrel tearing through a trash bag near the swings. When Claire finally spoke again, her voice was low but certain. "He's got a weekend trip booked. Told me it's a company retreat. Friday through Sunday. Napa." Jack's mouth didn't move, but his fingers twitched slightly. Dana had mentioned the same thing just 2 nights ago, over a glass of wine with her feet tucked beneath her on the couch. "Some winery thing," she'd said. "Networking. Boring as hell. You wouldn't like it." He'd smiled, even refilled her glass. Claire pulled out a small notepad from her purse and scribbled down the hotel and room number. "I wasn't going to check. But now? Let's say I'm curious to see how far he's willing to go." Jack accepted the note with a nod. "I'll handle the rest." When he got back home, Dana was in the living room with her friends from work. Laughter ricocheted off the walls like it was rented. The wine bottles were half drained. Dana had her feet on the coffee table, swirling her glass, playing the role of charming hostess. But her voice hit a tone he hadn't heard before, mocking, theatrical. "He actually offered to drive me to the airport. Can you believe that?" she said, laughing. "Like, sweetheart, do you even know what airport I'm flying into?" The women howled. One of them, Sandra, glanced at Jack and said, "You're such a sweetheart, Jack." "Dana's lucky." Jack smiled like a wax statue. "That's what she keeps telling me." Dana caught his eye, just for a moment, and there was something in her face. A flicker of guilt? No, just calculation. Measuring how much she could get away with. Jack had seen that look before on contractors who knew they'd misquoted but thought they could charm their way through it. Later, when her friends had gone and the dishwasher was humming in the background, Dana curled up next to him on the couch and said, "I feel like we've been closer lately. Don't you?" He kissed her forehead. "You're right. Something's definitely changed." She exhaled, satisfied, and nuzzled into his chest. Jack stared past her, at the dark window reflecting a version of himself he barely recognized anymore. This wasn't about grief now. It was engineering. And Claire? Claire had just handed him the blueprint. He wrapped the earrings in gold foil, and tied them with a ribbon she'd recognized from a drawer she never touched. She always said she hated surprises. Jack knew that wasn't true. She hated surprises she couldn't control. "Jack," she said with that startled little laugh, "you didn't have to get me anything." He smiled. "I wanted to." Inside the velvet box sat a pair of sapphire studs, real ones. Nothing cheap. Dana had once pointed them out at a window display during a wine-tasting trip they took before their marriage started unraveling. Back then, she said she didn't need jewelry. We're not those people. Apparently now, she was. Dana opened the box. "God, these are stunning." He kissed her cheek. "Figured you'd wear them tonight. Spa night, right?" Her eyes flicked toward him, searching, just for a second. Then the facade dropped back into place. "Right. Me, Leah, and Sandra. Facial massage gossip, kind of thing." "Sounds perfect," he said. "You deserve it." The earrings glinted as she turned them in the light. She didn't notice the tiny silver pinhole under the satin inlay. Didn't notice the battery pack wedged inside the hinge. She wouldn't. Most people don't inspect gifts they already believe they've earned. By 6:50 p.m., she was gone. Car rolling out the driveway like any other Thursday night. Jack didn't wave goodbye. Just waited until the sound of the engine was gone before moving. The calm that settled over the house wasn't peace. It was the hum of preparation. First stop, the printer. The desk in his study was already sorted, transcripts printed, labeled, color-coded. He worked methodically. Each conversation clipped from the original audio, time-stamped, and formatted like a script. Names were bolded. Locations highlighted. He even notated voice fluctuations where Dana would say things like, "I wish Jack would just disappear," or, "Alan, you make me feel like a real woman again." Each line was its own razor. He slid the completed transcripts into labeled folders. Car audio, March, phone, February, restaurant, Jan, and the newest, earrings, live. That file was still uploading to his encrypted drive via Bluetooth. He'd check the results in the morning. Second stop, the bank. Online, of course. He reviewed the trust confirmations again. Property transfers were airtight. The lake cabin was officially out of her reach. The house, legally severed from any marital claim by restructuring the deed through a shell trust. He triple-checked it all and flagged a reminder to move the last joint investment into his sister's name by the following Tuesday. Dana wouldn't get a cent if she tried. Third stop, his email. Subject line, engagement, forensic review inquiry. The recipient was a woman named Claudia Price. Retired IRS auditor turned forensic accountant. A friend of a friend kind of contact. Jack had met her once at a retirement planning seminar and remembered how she explained embezzlement cases like she was describing bad weather. "Claudia, I'm working on a financial separation. Clean, but layered. Suspect multiple crossovers of marital assets to non-marital uses. Need discretion. Potential legal relevance down the line." He attached a massed report of Dana's credit card statements from the last 9 months. 6 unexplained hotel bookings. 2 jewelry store charges, neither for the earrings he gave her. One $2,300 restaurant bill in Seattle. All billed on the company card Dana always said was just for show. Jack pressed send. The clock read 7:24 p.m. She wouldn't be back until close to midnight. He poured himself a glass of scotch, sat by the window, and listened. The earrings were transmitting clearly now. Static at first, then giggling. Multiple women. He recognized Sandra's voice. Then Dana's. "He actually bought me earrings. Can you believe that?" Dana snorted. "God, I should cheat more often." Laughter. "Sandra, you're awful." Dana, "No, seriously. I might start faking anniversaries just for the perks." More laughter. Then, muffled and low, the name, Alan. Jack didn't flinch. He'd learned how to stop reacting. His revenge wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was concrete, legal, bulletproof. Every piece was being set into place while Dana pranced through her little theater. He took another sip of scotch and pulled a small, steel box from under the couch cushion. Inside were 2 flash drives and a sealed envelope with a typed note. "To Claire, if anything happens to me, this story doesn't end quietly." He sealed the box, added a dated label, and placed it in the fireproof safe beneath the stairs. At 11:48 p.m., Dana walked back in smelling like cheap Chardonnay and lavender lotion. Long night? He asked without looking up from his book. She stretched like a satisfied cat. The spa was amazing. I feel like I shed 5 years. Jack looked over, smiled faintly. You look 10 years younger. She beamed. See? I should go out more often. You should, he agreed. She didn't notice the hard drive uploading quietly in the study. Didn't notice the forensic accountant reviewing her spending. Didn't know her assets were now air. But Jack did. And timing? Timing was everything. Wouldn't it be fun? Dana asked, voice syrupy with casual confidence. Just a little dinner, nothing formal. You always liked Alan, remember? Jack folded the corner of the newspaper he wasn't reading. Alan. From sales? She nodded too quickly. Ma'am. And Claire, of course. It's been ages since we've had people over. We should show them we're still alive and entertaining, right? The word entertaining hung in the air like smoke from a kitchen fire. Jack gave a warm, practiced nod. Sounds perfect. He didn't ask who came up with the idea. He didn't need to. Dana's tells were subtle, but familiar, like the uptick in perfume the morning after her yoga class, or how she suddenly cared about matching napkin rings again. But this was bold. A test, maybe. Or a game. Claire replied to his silent message with one word. Ready. Friday came fast. Jack grilled salmon with lemon dill glaze, Alan's favorite, according to Dana, who conveniently forgot she hated seafood. She made a beet salad from scratch. Claire brought wine. Alan brought his fake smile and a bouquet that looked like it came from a gas station on the way over. Dana wore a dress Jack hadn't seen in years. Tight, expensive, bought for someone else's eyes. Claire wore simple earrings and said little, just enough. She was brilliant. The four of them sat down at the table Jack had refinished with his own hands 15 years ago. Dana toasted old friends and new beginnings. Jack toasted long marriages and short memories. They all laughed. The wine flowed. Dana filled her glass faster than usual. She leaned into Alan's stories, laughed too hard, nodded too quickly. Claire played along, gracious and sharp, every smile a razor tucked behind lipstick. Jack just watched how Dana's eyes lingered on Alan when he spoke. How she complimented Claire's dress but didn't really look at it. Watched Alan's hand tremble slightly when Claire reached for his wine glass instead of her own. Watched how under the table, Dana shifted her leg toward Alan's side, and for just a fraction of a second, her fingers brushed his. Jack didn't flinch. He smiled. Dessert, he offered, standing smoothly. Please, Dana said, slightly flushed. Jack makes the best tiramisu. That's true, Claire added gently. He really does. In the kitchen, Jack plated 4 perfect slices. As he did, he replayed the moment under the table in his mind like a slow-motion scene from a courtroom drama. He didn't need the earrings tonight. Didn't need the car recorder or the mic in the air vent. Some truths don't need playback. Some betrayals are felt before they're heard. When he returned to the dining room, Alan was finishing a joke about Italian investors and Claire was laughing. Not too loud. Just right. Jack served dessert. As Dana ate, he refilled her glass. You're glowing tonight, he said. She laughed too loud. It's the wine. No, Claire said, tilting her head. It's something else. Dana blinked. Oh, you seem lighter, Claire said. Like you've been unburdened. There it was, a flicker. Guilt? Defiance? It didn't matter. Alan coughed. Excuse me. I'm going to... Bathrooms down the hall, Jack said without looking up. Second door on the right. Alan froze a half-beat longer than necessary before disappearing. Dana stood, brushing invisible lint from her hip. I'll help you, Claire. No need, Claire cut in, placing a hand over her wine glass. I'm good. Sit. Enjoy the night. Jack watched Dana slowly lower herself back into the chair. For the first time all evening, she looked small. Uncertain. Alan returned, composed but slightly pale. Jack stood. Thank you both for coming. Truly. Thank you for having us, Alan replied, as darting toward the door. Dana clinked her glass lazily. To friends. Jack raised his. To truth. He caught Claire's gaze across the table. She blinked once. Agreement. They were synced now, like co-conspirators in a theater no one else realized was burning down. The evening ended in polite hugs and fake smiles. As they left, Dana turned to Jack and said, That went well, right? Jack nodded, slowly closing the front door. It went exactly as it needed to. And behind the quiet answer, beneath the floorboards of civility and restraint, Jack knew one final thing. He no longer needed recordings. Now, he had witnesses. She kissed him on the cheek before she left. "Don't wait up," Dana said, slipping on heels too new and a blouse too tight for a business dinner. It might run late. New clients. Big ones. Jack stood in the foyer, holding her coat open like a husband still trying. "Of course," he said. "Close that deal." She smiled, grateful, almost relieved. He watched her walk down the porch steps, unlock the Volvo with a chirp, and vanish into the night. The moment the car turned the corner, Jack stepped into the garage. He didn't hesitate this time. The recorder was where it always was, clipped to the undercarriage lining of the driver's seat, camouflaged behind a mat of dust and wires. He popped it out with a flick of his finger, held it in his palm for a moment, then went back inside, locking the garage door behind him with a finality that felt ceremonial. He walked into the study, slid the micro SD into the adapter, and plugged it into his laptop. The files loaded instantly, one continuous recording, 2 hours and 37 minutes, time-stamped and clean. No static. No skips. She had forgotten it was there. Perfect. He pressed play and sat back. "Are you wearing the necklace I got you?" Alan's voice, cocky and low. Dana, laughing. "I'm wearing everything but it." They both laughed. Then came the words that settled something in Jack's chest, words that didn't sting, didn't shock, but instead confirmed what he already knew and had known for months. The only difference now was clarity. Dana, honestly, if Jack ever found out, he'd probably just fold laundry and act like nothing happened. Alan, he's a goddamn fossil. Let him fade out. Dana, let him. I already have. That was the moment. Not the sex talk. Not the petty jabs. But that line, I already have. That was the kill shot. Jack didn't pause the audio. He simply opened a new folder, dragged the file in, and labeled it Closure. Then he stood, rolled his sleeves up, and began to prepare. He vacuumed the living room, wiped down the coffee table, lit the sandalwood candle Dana used to love before she started loving someone else. He poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon and placed the glass on a coaster, an actual coaster, beside the old armchair she hated. He connected the Bluetooth speaker to his laptop, queued up the file, and set the volume to exactly 38. Just loud enough to be unmistakable. Just soft enough that she'd have to enter the room to hear it clearly. He adjusted the lighting. Not too harsh, not too dim. Warm. Inviting. Like home used to feel. At 11:07 p.m., her headlights swept across the driveway. Jack didn't flinch. He took his seat, took a sip of bourbon, and calmly hit play. Her voice filled the room. "You know what he did last week? Bought me flowers. Like it's 1995. Alan laughed. "He still thinks he has a shot." "Dana, he still thinks we're married." Another round of laughter. Then a long silence, the kind that meant hands were moving, bodies shifting. Then Dana whispered, "Let him die thinking I loved him." Jack didn't react. He just sat there, drink in hand, while the audio kept playing. The front door clicked open. She stepped inside, heels tapping the floor, and froze. The sound of her own voice met her like a slap. "Alan, what if he finds out?" "Dana, then we'll lie. We've done it before." Jack didn't look at her. He just sipped the bourbon again. The ice clinked against the glass. He could hear her breath catch in her throat, that first little gasp when the mind starts racing faster than it can hide. "Jack, what is this?" He didn't speak. Not yet. He simply let the file continue. "I'm not going to waste another year playing step-forward wife to a man who doesn't even know what I want in bed," Dana said in the recording, her voice as clear and sharp as a scalpel. "Alan makes me feel like I matter." Then, after a beat, laughter again. Longer this time. Cruel. Dana stood frozen in the archway, mascara starting to run even though she hadn't cried yet. Jack finally looked at her. Just once. A long, slow gaze. Not pleading. Not wounded. Just done. He didn't turn off the speaker. Didn't stop the recording. Let it roll. Let it bleed. Because this wasn't confrontation. It was the funeral of a lie. And Jack had been digging the grave for months. He raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he whispered. Then went quiet. And waited for the next lie to die. The door creaked open at 11:57 p.m. Dana stepped inside on the tips of her heels, The quiet hush of someone returning from a place they shouldn't have been. The house was dimly lit, warm glow from the side lamp, faint crackle from the fireplace. Smelled like bourbon and sandalwood. She blinked. Jack was sitting in the armchair. Still dressed. Still awake. Still smiling. "Jack," she said, slipping her purse from her shoulder. "You scared me." He didn't reply immediately. Just swirled the bourbon in his glass and nodded toward the couch. "Wine's open. Pinot. Your favorite." She hesitated. He noticed the brief flicker of confusion masked his curiosity. He hadn't waited up in years. "Thanks," she said cautiously, setting her bag down. "You didn't have to." Jack gestured again, smooth and controlled. "Come. Sit. Let's have a toast." "To honesty." Dana blinked. Her defenses hadn't kicked in yet. She hadn't smelled the fire behind the pleasantries. She poured herself a glass and sat on the edge of the couch, too upright for someone in her own living room. "This is nice," she said. "What's the occasion?" He studied her for a long second. Not her words, her posture, her eyes, her breath, how her hands twitched just slightly on the stem of the wine glass. "No occasion," Jack replied calmly. "Just thought it was time we heard each other." Clearly. Then, he reached to the table beside him and pressed play. Her voice filled the room. "I'm not going to waste another year playing step-forward wife to a man who doesn't even know what I want in bed." The sound hit her like a punch to the temple. She didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at the speaker, wide-eyed, lips parted, like she couldn't place the voice. But it was her voice. From less than 4 hours ago. Jack let the silence after that line sit. Linger. Then came Alan's low chuckle, his unmistakable drawl. "He still thinks he's the man of the house." Then Dana again. "Let him. I'm already planning how to take what I can and vanish. He won't even see it coming." Her wineglass trembled in her hand. Not enough to spill. Just enough to prove she was listening. She set it down. Slowly. "Jack," she whispered. "What is this?" He raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like strategy." "Yours." She stood, then sat again, panicked thoughts racing behind her eyes. "You don't understand. This isn't what it sounds like." Jack tilted his head. "Then help me. What does it sound like?" The recording continued. Alan's voice, clear as daylight. "We'll fake a business retreat. Napa. Get her to file first. You're entitled to half minimum." Dana opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her face turned a shade of white Jack hadn't seen since her mother's funeral. She clutched her necklace, the one Alan had given her, the one she always claimed came from a vendor at the art fair. "Jack, please," she finally croaked. You weren't supposed to it." He cut her off. "No, I wasn't. I wasn't supposed to know. Wasn't supposed to hear. Wasn't supposed to matter. Isn't that what you said?" She shook her head, tears forming now. Not from guilt. From fear. "You don't understand what this has been like," she began, voice shaking. "You've been distant for years. I tried. I did. I needed." He laughed once. Cold. Flat. "You needed Alan?" Dana stood, panic now boiling over. "We can talk about this. We can fix." "You already fixed it," Jack said, eyes locked on her. "You and Alan. All those late meetings. All those weekends in Napa. That wasn't business, Dana. That was demolition." She took a step forward, hand reaching out. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought maybe you suspected, but I didn't think you'd." He stood slowly, taller than she remembered, straighter, like betrayal had become posture. "You thought I'd what? Keep mowing the lawn while you stole the house? Smile through birthdays while you whispered about me in someone else's bed?" Tears slid down her cheeks. Her hands trembled now, not just the glass. "Please. Please, Jack. You don't know the whole story." Jack walked to the fireplace, pulled a folder from beneath the mantel, and dropped it on the coffee table. It hit with a soft thud. Inside, transcripts. Receipts. Asset transfers. Photos. Evidence. Dana stared at it like it might explode. "I know enough," Jack said softly. "And what I don't know, I'll let the silence fill in." Then he walked past her, headed for the hallway. "Wait," she said. "What happens now?" He paused, turned his head just slightly. I pressed play again, and the next track began. Dana stared at the speaker as if her own voice might leap out and strangle her. But it wasn't the sound that broke her, it was the silence after. The part where Jack didn't shout, didn't accuse, didn't even ask why. He just walked back in with a single manila folder. Thick. Overstuffed. Bent at the corners from how many times he'd handled it. She flinched as he laid it on the table in front of her like a detonator. "What is that?" she whispered. Jack sat. Calm. Careful. Composed. "This is everything," he said. "Recordings. Transcripts. Financial moves. Copies of the trust restructuring. Asset transfers. Power of attorney changes. Oh, and a few notes about Alan's little side dealings with your firm's discretionary account." She blinked hard. "You, what?" "I wanted you to see it all," he said. "So there's no confusion later when the locks are changed. When the accounts freeze. When your email stops working. When your name no longer exists in the narrative." Her mouth opened, then closed. Her hands trembled above the folder, hovering like she was afraid to touch it. "I don't understand," she stammered. "You do," Jack said, sipping his bourbon. "You just didn't expect this version of me." She opened the folder. Photos of receipts. Legal filings with official stamps. Screenshots of account balances, each one drained, rerouted, or removed from joint ownership. Jack had moved everything. She flipped through document after document, each one delivering a new blow. The house, put into a trust in his niece's name. The lake cabin, gifted to a foundation he quietly registered. The vehicles, the stocks, the insurance, all severed from her world like nerves in a surgery she slept through. No, this isn't legal," she said, voice cracking. "You can't just—" "I can," Jack said, leaning back. "I did." Dana fell into the couch like someone had knocked the air from her lungs. "You can't do this to me," she said, shaking her head violently. "I built this life with you. I gave you years." "You rented them," Jack said. "Turns out the lease expired the day you laughed about letting me die thinking I was loved." Tears streamed down her face now, her mascara finally surrendering. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice hollow. "Somewhere quiet," Jack said. "A cabin. Off-grid. Got a new phone number. New bank. Left my name behind." She stood suddenly. "You don't get to disappear. We can talk. We can fix this." "I was going to—" "Don't," Jack said, his voice low and cutting. "Don't rewrite it now." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a second folder. This one was smaller. He handed it to her. She opened it and froze. A letter, addressed to Claire, and inside USB drives. Identical copies of the recordings. Transcripts. A single sentence typed at the bottom of the page. "If anything happens to me, publish everything." Dana's lips trembled. "You gave it to her?" "She already has it," Jack said. "She knew before you poured your second glass of wine tonight." Dana staggered backward like she'd been shot. "No, she wouldn't," Alan said. "Alan's not answering his phone right now," Jack said. Claire changed the locks. Froze the accounts. Told the girls. "He's not walking into anything tonight except a wall." Dana's knees buckled, and she dropped into the chair, gasping for air. "You're burning it all down," she choked. "I'm just taking back what was mine," Jack replied. "You and Alan thought I'd go down quietly. That I'd nod along and vanish like a tired old man too worn to fight." He stood, picked up his coat, took one last sip of bourbon. "But I built this house. I built you. And I don't lose what I've built. I dismantle it." Dana reached for his hand, sobbing now, fingers clutching like a drowning woman. "Please, Jack, please, we can fix this. Just stay. Just talk to me." He looked at her, not with hatred, with absence. "You had 100 nights to talk to me," he said. "But you spent them whispering to someone who thought I was already dead." He walked to the door. She cried his name once, then again, and again. He opened it. Cold air swept in. Before stepping out, he looked back one final time. "The worst part for you," he said quietly, "isn't that I'm leaving. It's that I already left." Then he was gone. She was still sobbing when he reached the hallway. "Jack, wait. I didn't mean any of it," she croaked, voice shredded raw. "People say things. We were drunk. You don't understand the pressure I've been under." He stopped, turned, her face lit with a flicker of hope, some pathetic ember that maybe, he would sit down and give her one more lifeline to pull. Jack reached into the side pocket of his coat and took out a second flash drive. No words, no drama. He walked back into the living room and inserted it into the speaker's port. Pressed play. Dana flinched as her voice filled the room again. But this time, there was no flirtation, no giggling, just a colder, deeper contempt. The real her. Unedited. I never loved him. Not really, she said, slurring slightly, but clearly. He was always just there. Safe. Predictable. Like a backup plan with a retirement fund. Alan's voice. Then why not leave? Because he made things easier. He's tolerable. You don't throw away a good umbrella in a drizzle, you know? They both laughed. Then Dana added, sometimes I wonder if he even has a soul under all that silence. Jack didn't look at her, didn't tilt his head, didn't sip his drink. He just stood still, motionless, letting the full weight of her truth crash through the air like a wrecking ball made of her own tongue. Dana's knees buckled. For real this time. She collapsed to the floor, hands slapping against the hardwood as if begging the house to catch her. A sound escaped her throat, somewhere between a sob and a retch. She reached for the couch, tried to pull herself up, but her arms gave out. Jack, please, I didn't mean that. I was angry. I didn't know. Please don't go like this. He turned to look at her. On her knees now, hair wild, mouth trembling. The woman who once laughed about how clueless he was, who plotted around wine glasses and whispered her escape plans in hotel rooms. That woman was gone. This one was cracked porcelain. He adjusted the strap on his shoulder, picked up the suitcase, walked slowly past her. She grabbed at his pant leg like a child pulling at a parent's sleeve, desperate, frantic. I'll fix it. I'll do anything. You don't have to go. Jack paused at the door. The recording was still playing behind him. His voice wasn't in it. He never appeared in any of the clips. That, perhaps, was the saddest part for her. The realization that she had cheated on a ghost, and now that ghost was walking away, flesh and bone in decision. She tried one last time, barely audible. Say something. Jack placed his hand on the doorknob, then stopped. He looked over his shoulder, not at her face, but the space she occupied. The collapsed wreckage of what once called itself a wife. Her hands trembled. Her eyes were wide and hollow. He opened his mouth slightly, as if he might speak. Then he didn't. No words. No anger. Just the click of the door unlatching, and the soft snick as it shut behind him. And in that silence, the only thing left echoing in the room was her own voice, saying she never loved him. She screamed at me because I bought the wrong kind of almond milk. That was the moment. Not an affair. Not some deep betrayal. Just almond milk. I stood there holding a paper bag and a receipt, while Teresa, my wife of 14 years, berated me like I'd dropped our dog off a cliff. You don't listen. I told you unsweetened. She shrieked, her voice bouncing off the marble backsplash she insisted on installing last summer. I set the bag down. She was barefoot, pacing around the kitchen in that silk robe she only wore when she was trying to look effortlessly powerful. Then she said it. Go ahead. Leave. You'll come crawling back. It was delivered so casually, like she was daring me, like she thought I'd sputter, apologize, beg for forgiveness, and promise to try harder. But I didn't. I just turned off the kettle, looked at her, and said, all right. No sarcasm. No yelling. Just the word. And then I walked upstairs. She probably thought I was doing one of my silent episodes, a little drama retreat, like I used to. But this time was different. This time, I grabbed the gray suitcase I hadn't used since my brother's funeral and packed 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, a razor, and that folder I'd been keeping behind the HVAC unit labeled Phase 2. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't pound. If anything, I felt still for the first time in years. When I came back down, she was already texting someone, probably venting to her sister about how difficult I was being. I walked past her, set my wedding ring on the counter next to her kombucha. The silence hit her before the meaning did. Wait, Howard, where are you going? But I was already at the door, already stepping out into the night. The street was empty, the sky cloudless, clean, like a reset button had just been hit. Now, before I tell you what happened next, how she unraveled, how the walls she leaned on started to cave, I want to say something quickly. Over 98% of the people who listen to these stories aren't subscribed. And yet you're here, reading this. So if you're one of them, consider helping us reach our very first 10,000 subscribers. It's a small gesture, but for me and my team, it's a huge reason to keep creating stories like this. Thank you. Back to the night I left. I drove exactly 93 minutes north, to a place I knew she wouldn't look. A cabin I'd bought under a shell company 2 years earlier, not because I was cheating, but because I was preparing. Preparing for this. Because Teresa didn't break me with that almond milk fight. She just gave me permission. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, is that I had already spent over a year slowly and methodically extricating myself from every single thread she could pull. No more shared credit cards. No jointly titled property. The house? Transferred to a trust under my daughter's name months ago. The vehicles? Mine was paid off. Hers? Leased in my name. Teresa thought she had time. She thought she had power. She thought I was too passive to ever walk away. What she didn't realize is that quiet men don't bark warnings. We dig escape tunnels. And wait. The cabin was nothing special. 2 rooms. Wood stove. No cable. Cell signal came and went like a drunk neighbor. But that was the point. It sat quiet behind a split-rail fence, halfway down a dirt road in a town no one remembered unless their car broke down there. I'd bought it under a business named Nobody, but I had ever heard of. It had no online paper trail, no digital fingerprint. Just the smell of cedar and a safe bolted into the floorboards. I unlocked it that night with a key that had been sitting under the passenger seat of my car for 18 months. Inside the safe, an old manila folder. Worn, bent at the edges. Labeled in my own handwriting. Phase 2. I made tea. Sat down. Opened it. And smiled. I hadn't smiled like that in years. Not since before Teresa's detox retreats and wine-soaked girls' weekends. Not since the second gym buddy who kept texting her at midnight. Not since she started calling me predictable the way someone spits out a fruit they didn't want. The folder held a roadmap. First page. List of joint accounts. All flagged with the exact date I'd started reducing balances. Not closing, just reallocating. I didn't want her to notice. I just wanted her to get comfortable. Second page, property deeds. 3 of them. The house. Not in our names anymore. A family trust, built legally, cleanly, months prior, had assumed full ownership. And that trust belonged solely to my daughter. Teresa thought she could drag me through the courts if it ever came to that. I'd seen it happen to too many of my clients. That's why I acted first. The next document listed every vehicle we owned. My truck? Paid in cash 3 years ago. Her SUV? Leased, under my name, with a clause allowing me to rescind authorization in the event of separation. She loved that car. Boasted about it constantly on social media. But it was never hers. She just hadn't been informed of that, yet. I flipped to the 4th section, a spreadsheet. Nothing fancy. Just the clean structure of an accountant's vengeance. Dates. Transfers. Authorizations revoked. Each line a stitch in a parachute she never knew I'd been sewing. For myself. There was even a list of passwords, accounts she didn't know existed, emails I'd set up for forwarding legal documents, and a retirement account under a trade name she always thought was a dead project of mine. It wasn't. It had grown quietly, pulling from a diversified bundle I'd built while she was still busy maxing out his and hers spa packages. It's amazing what you can do with discipline and boredom. Most men crack in one of 2 ways, rage or retreat. I didn't do either. I converted every insult, every eye roll, every night she came home drunk from networking dinners into calculated exits. My job was numbers. My hobby became control. And control is a hell of a drug. There was one more document at the bottom of the folder. Handwritten. Unassuming. A checklist. Cabin secure. Teresa unaware. Daughter briefed. Phase 2 initiated. I stared at that last item. Checked it off. And poured myself another cup of tea. 3 days after I left, Teresa hosted what she later called her freedom brunch. 12 women. Most of them the kind that introduce themselves with job titles they don't technically have. Yoga consultants. Lifestyle curators. A few real estate agents who hadn't sold a property since the last housing boom. All of them buzzed into our home, my former home, with Bellinis and backhanded sympathy. Oh honey, he left over almond milk? Men are so emotionally constipated. I always knew Howard had control issues. Quiet ones usually do. You're glowing, babe. Like, post-divorce Gwyneth. Teresa soaked it in. She wore a white linen jumpsuit that screamed, I'm thriving. Paired it with pearls, my mother's pearls. She even lit the sage I bought her after her second panic attack last winter. The same one she swore smelled like old people and guilt. And she posted a photo. Glass raised. Crooked grin. Her left hand very deliberately bare. The caption? Mimosas taste better without passive aggression. Good riddance. Sun sparkles. I saw it, of course. I wasn't stalking her. My daughter texted it to me with one word. Wow. But I didn't feel anger. Not even a flicker of hurt. Because while she sipped her overpriced champagne and basked in hollow praise, I was on my laptop at the cabin, clicking confirm on the final trigger, the termination of our shared account's autofunding. See, the joint account was a clever little decoy. Every month, it received a fixed deposit from my consulting LLC. A flat amount, just enough to lull her into thinking things were stable. I let it keep running for years. Even while I rerouted our real money elsewhere, I kept that account breathing, quiet, regular, reliable. Like me, but not anymore. I set the final transfer to $0. Changed the routing. Updated the recipient on the back end to a private account under my daughter's custodial trust. All legal. All clean. All invisible. And just like that, Teresa's pipeline of safety dried up. She wouldn't notice it right away. That's the trick. She'd swipe her card at Whole Foods tomorrow, and it would still work. She'd Venmo her nail tech, tip her barista, Uber to her manifestation coach. But the balance wouldn't rise. And by next week, when the car lease payment bounced, when the house cleaner quit because her Zelle didn't clear, when her boutique wine subscription failed to renew and she got an update payment method email, the countdown would begin. Because Teresa didn't just dance on the ashes. She threw a party on them. And what she never considered, what women like her never consider, is that sometimes ashes are still hot. Sometimes they smolder. Quietly. Waiting for wind. And I was the wind. The first buzz didn't register. Teresa was mid-conversation with her esthetician, complaining about the fungal energy in her yoga studio. Her phone lit up next to the sink. Transaction failed. Please verify your account. She frowned. Blinked. Probably thought it was a glitch. She hit retry. Same message. Then another ping. Notice. Your access to joint checking #####8274 has been revoked. She stared at the screen like it had insulted her. Her thumb hovered, hesitated, then dialed the bank. She was still smiling when she got through. That syrupy tone she reserved for waiters and front desk clerks. Hi. Yeah, this is Teresa Holbrook. I'm trying to access my account, and something weird is happening. Her voice tightened after the rep's first sentence. By the third, the smile was gone. No, I am on the account. It's our account. My husband set it up. Yes, I'm his wife. Yes, still legally. Silence. No, I didn't request any changes. What do you mean I've been removed? She hung up without saying goodbye. That was the first ripple in the glass. She reached for her wallet and tried her backup, her personal credit card. The one she used for all her fun expenses. Brunches. Spa days. Surprise gifts for herself, usually posted to Instagram with captions like treat yourself first. Always. Declined. Twice. She told herself it was just a system error. Maybe the bank was updating something. Maybe there was a fraud alert. But then she logged into her account, and the number staring back at her was shockingly, insultingly low. $18.42. She refreshed the page. Again. Again. No change. It was almost noon. Teresa sat down at the kitchen island, the same place she'd declared her freedom over mimosas just days earlier. Her hand trembled slightly as she opened another app, then another. Venmo? Frozen. PayPal? Unlinked. That creeping feeling, like when you realize a car isn't going to stop in time, started to slither up her spine. She called the bank again. Got a different rep. Demanded a manager. Demanded to know who made the changes. My husband would never. He wouldn't just cut me off. Except, maybe he would. That's when she remembered the ring. The way it had sat, glinting on the counter like a punctuation mark. Not thrown. Not lost. Left. She stood up. Started pacing. The dogs watched her from the couch, heads tilted. She snapped at them, at everything. By 4 p.m., Teresa had made 6 calls to the bank, 2 to the credit card company, and 1 to her sister, who didn't answer. The last thing she did before sunset was text me. Howard, what the hell is going on? Are you seriously doing this? I didn't respond. Because the next domino hadn't fallen yet. But I knew exactly when it would. 9:03 a.m. the next morning, the minute her luxury SUV failed to start. The next morning, Teresa pulled on her leather trench coat, the one she called her power layer, and clipped in those red-bottomed heels she only wore when she needed to feel above people. She was meeting a friend at that overpriced cafe downtown where they served avocado toast with edible gold flakes. She grabbed her keys, walked confidently down the front steps, pressed the unlock button on her fob. Nothing. Pressed again. Still nothing. The SUV, her beloved obsidian black luxury tank, sat in the driveway like a corpse. No blink. No beep. Not even a shrug from the mirrors. She muttered to herself and pressed the button again, harder this time, like force was the issue. Still nothing. She walked around it, tried the door manually. Locked. She opened the app on her phone, the one synced to the vehicle system, and was greeted with a login error. Then a message. This account is no longer associated with an active leaseholder. Her heart did that flutter thing. Not romantic butterflies. The warning flutter. The something's deeply wrong flutter. She stood in her driveway, wind tugging her coat open, hair starting to whip out of its glossy style. Neighbors across the street were dragging out trash cans. Someone waved. She didn't wave back. Teresa dialed the dealership. "Hi, I'm trying to get into my car and The rep interrupted after pulling up the file. "Ma'am, the lease is no longer under your name." She blinked. "I'm sorry, that can't be right. My husband, he pays for her." Another pause on the line. Then a firmer tone. "Correction. Your ex-husband." That word. Ex. Like someone had taken a shovel to her chest and scooped out the air. She laughed nervously. "No, we're not divorced. There's been some kind of mistake. That's my car. I drive it. My things are in it. I understand, ma'am, but the lessee was removed from the agreement 2 weeks ago. The vehicle is now pending repossession or reassignment. If you could step away from the vehicle, that would be best for now." Step away. As if she were a threat. As if she were trespassing. The SUV sat silently while she stood there, arms limp at her sides, phone pressed to one ear, disbelief crashing into humiliation like slow waves that got heavier with each crash. That SUV had been her chariot, her identity, how she showed the world she had leveled up. It was the backdrop for her boss lady stories and morning affirmation reels. It was how she justified the lie she told herself, that she was the one in control. Now it was just a locked box she had no key to. She tried calling me again. It rang once, then went a voicemail. She didn't leave a message this time. She just stood there, in the middle of the driveway, clutching a useless key fob, with neighbors peeking through their blinds, watching the woman who always looked like she had it all together, suddenly stuck, helpless, hollowed out, and still unaware that this was only the halfway point. By the time Monday rolled around, Teresa had mentally duct-taped herself back together. Lip gloss, blazer, iced coffee, armor. She strutted into her office like a woman walking through smoke, pretending there wasn't a fire behind her. She figured she could fix this. Maybe she'd call the bank again. Maybe she'd cry harder. Maybe Howard was just processing and would come to his senses. Maybe she could spin it with friends. He's having a breakdown. Poor guy. I'm being supportive from a distance. She told herself whatever she had to. That's how she always operated, control the narrative, and the truth follows. But when she stepped out of the elevator and into reception, her assistant didn't meet her eyes. The HR director, Claire, was already waiting. Hands folded. Smile tight. "Teresa, can we speak privately?" Teresa blinked. "No? I've got." Claire didn't blink. "Now." They walked past open-plan desks and curious glances, into a glass-walled conference room that felt colder than it ever had. Teresa sat. Claire didn't. She set down a folder. "We received a call last week from a compliance officer regarding a trust fund linked to one of our senior consultants. Your name appeared as an authorized secondary beneficiary on a number of flag transfers." Teresa laughed once. Dry. "Wait, what? No, that must be a mix-up. Howard handled all of that. It's his." Claire cut in. "The account in question is connected to a consulting firm he operated while also under our financial services umbrella. You were listed on several expense reports as client engagement." The words hit slowly, like drops of cold water in a quiet room. "Expense reports," Teresa repeated. Claire nodded. "Trips to Napa. A boutique spa in Sedona. A work retreat. at the Cayman Villa Resort. Teresa's mouth opened, then closed. You were reimbursed under corporate funds, Claire added, flipping open the folder. Except the receipts, well, they're itemized. And most don't qualify as client-facing activity. She saw the screenshots. Charges under her name. Spa treatments. Designer purchases. The infamous wine tasting she Instagrammed as hashtag self-care. Howard had reported them all. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just filed them. With timestamps. Memos. Context. He didn't accuse her. He let the paper trail do it for him. Until this is resolved, Claire continued, your company card access will be frozen. We're also suspending system access while the investigation runs its course. Teresa blinked. Once. Twice. I don't understand. Howard would never throw me under the bus like this. He wouldn't. But he would. And he had. She walked out of that room like a woman trying to look tall on a sinking floor. Her co-workers watched her, some with confusion, others with that half-smile people wear when they smell blood, and it's not theirs. In the elevator, she clutched her bag so tightly her fingers went white. She texted Howard again. Why are you doing this? Do you want to destroy me? No reply. She didn't know yet that the real question wasn't why I was doing it. It was how little I had to do to make it happen. 2 days after the HR ambush, Teresa found herself parked outside a modest beige townhouse in a cul-de-sac she once mocked as middle-class purgatory. Her sister Amelia lived there with her husband and their 2 kids. No live-in housekeeper. No Peloton shrine. No quartz kitchen island. Just a mortgage, a minivan, and a mailbox stuffed with discount grocery flyers. Teresa hadn't visited in over a year. Not since she rolled her eyes at Amelia's Costco wine and passive-aggressively suggested they upgrade their aesthetic. That visit ended with Amelia fake smiling through clenched teeth and Teresa saying she'd rather vacation alone than stay here again. But now, she was standing on the porch with mascara already flaking under her eyes and a frozen bank account in her back pocket. The door opened slowly. Amelia took one look at her and leaned against the frame, arms crossed. Teresa jumped straight into it. I need help. Obviously. Can I come in? Amelia didn't answer, just stepped aside without warmth. The living room smelled like grilled cheese and crayon wax. One of the kids peeked around a corner, and Teresa waved half-heartedly, already uncomfortable in the silence. I don't need much, Teresa said, sitting on the edge of the couch like it might stain her. Just enough to hold me over while I fix things. Maybe $2,000. 3, if you can. Amelia scoffed, loud enough to wake the sleeping dog on the rug. Fix things. I'm handling it. Teresa snapped, trying to recover her footing. Howard's clearly having some kind of episode. A man doesn't just walk out like that and dismantle everything unless he's. Amelia raised a brow. Unless what? Tired of being treated like furniture with a paycheck. Teresa stared at her. You don't know what it was like. I know he paid for your implants, your retreats, your juicing coach, whatever the hell that was. I know he helped us cover Dad's hospice costs. Quietly, without ever making us feel like we owed him. That was his choice. Teresa shouted, then flinched at her own voice. He wanted to help. That doesn't mean he gets to just vanish and leave me with nothing. Amelia shook her head, slowly. No, Teresa. He didn't leave you with nothing. You gambled it all away. On drama. On image. On yourself. And the house always wins. Teresa's voice cracked. He'll come back. He has to. He just needs time. Amelia looked at her for a long, still moment, then walked to a nearby drawer, pulled something out, and returned. It wasn't cash. It was a small, handwritten thank you note. From Howard. Years ago. Thanks again for the garden tools. You saved my back. Tell the boys I'll bring more comic books next time. H. He already came back, Amelia said, holding up the note. Just not to you. Teresa stood slowly, her skin buzzing. Rage. Embarrassment. Shame. It all blended into a sickly heat under her collarbones. Thanks for nothing, she snapped, heading to the door. But Amelia didn't stop her. Didn't offer pity. Didn't even say goodbye. Just called out behind her, loud enough for the neighbors. You might want to check your closet when you get home. That man probably owns the hanger rods too. She hadn't spoken to my daughter in over a year. Not really. There were occasional fake smiles at family dinners, the kind Teresa thought passed as diplomacy. But even before everything went down, she never hid her disdain. "She's too attached to you," she once whispered after a Christmas brunch. "It's not healthy." Funny how quick the contempt evaporated when Teresa needed something. That Thursday, she drove across town, rented sedan this time, nothing like the SUV she used to lord over valet stands. She wore oversized sunglasses, no makeup, hair knotted like a rushed apology. The apartment complex was modest but clean, not the sort of place Teresa used to even look at when driving by. But she pressed the buzzer like it owed her a favor. A pause. Then, "Who is it?" "It's Teresa," she said. "Please. I just want to talk." A longer pause. Then the door buzzed open. She climbed the stairs, heels echoing like guilt. When the door opened, my daughter stood there in jeans and a hoodie, arms folded, not hostile, not cold. Just done. Teresa started with a whisper. "I didn't know where else to go. Clearly. I know things got ugly. But I just need to understand. He won't answer me. I can't access anything. My credit's frozen. My attorney says there's no record of our old trust," and she stopped herself before unraveling into full hysteria. My daughter didn't move, didn't flinch, just stepped aside. "Come in." Teresa walked in like a ghost, eyes flicking across the room. Minimalist furniture, houseplants, a framed photo of her and me on a hiking trail from years ago. Teresa lingered on it a second too long. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "I just want something. A clue. A chance to fix it." The silence that followed was surgical. Then my daughter turned, walked to a drawer, pulled out a plain white envelope, and placed it on the coffee table. No words. No drama. Teresa looked at it like it might explode, then picked it up. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Finalized divorce decree. Her name, legally removed from all marital retirement instruments. Trusts, IRAs, 401ks. Signed. Stamped. Witnessed. Filed. Retroactively effective. Teresa's lips moved, but no sound came. She looked up, watery-eyed. "You had this whole time?" My daughter nodded. "He asked me to hold on to it. Said if you ever came knocking, he wanted the end to be unambiguous." "You don't understand what he's doing to me," Teresa whispered, trembling. "Oh, I do," she said calmly. "He's doing what you never thought he had the spine to do." Teresa tried one more move. "Please. I loved him. I still..." "No," my daughter cut in. "You loved what he provided. You mocked who he was." That landed like a slap. Because it was true. Teresa folded the decree back into the envelope like it was radioactive. "I should have seen it coming," she muttered. My daughter didn't respond. She didn't have to. Because at that point, Teresa wasn't looking for forgiveness. She was just looking for oxygen in a room she'd already set on fire. The sun hadn't even cleared the tree lane when it happened. Teresa woke up in the silence of a house that felt emptier than usual. Not physically, her art was still on the walls, her skincare fridge still buzzing in the bathroom, but there was a hollowness in the air, like the walls had finally learned to stop pretending they were part of something real. She shuffled into the kitchen, barefoot, hair wild, silk robe hanging off one shoulder. The fridge hummed. The espresso machine blinked, wanting water. Everything wanted something from her, except Howard. And that absence had weight. She unlocked her phone out of habit, expecting at least one reply from the dozens of texts she'd sent him. Nothing. But there was a new notification waiting at the top of her screen. Account ######9201 closed. Balance transferred. She blinked, sat down, opened her banking app. The screen loaded slowly. She hadn't updated the app in months. Then it appeared. Zero. Not low. Zero. The emergency fund she always bragged about having just in case, gone. The rent money for next month? Gone. The leftover cushion she was counting on until her next private Pilates payment cleared? Gone. For a moment, she thought it was a glitch. Some banking error. Maybe an internal lock she could appeal. But then she scrolled and saw the transfer. An outbound movement of funds into an account she'd never seen. A number ending in 2 digits she didn't recognize, but I did. It was the trust I'd set up 6 months before she ever told me I was starting to feel like her uncle. The screen didn't freeze. She did. Then came the noise. Not a scream at first. A sound deeper than that. Something between a gasp and a sob, as if the air had been yanked out of her lungs before she could scream it properly. She stood, backed away from the table like the phone might bite. then picked it up and threw it hard. It slammed into the cabinets, screen splintering on impact, shards scattering across the tile like dropped glassware. Then came the real scream. It rose from somewhere primal. Rage and panic blended into a howl of pure disbelief. It rattled the quiet house, carried through the thin window panes, echoed into the quiet suburban street. 2 doors down, a neighbor dropped her gardening gloves and stared. A jogger slowed as he passed. Somewhere, a dog began barking wildly. Inside, Teresa collapsed onto the cold tile floor, robe twisted beneath her, shoulders shaking. She curled in on herself like she was trying to disappear, to fold into something small enough to escape the reality she had spent years refusing to acknowledge. Because it wasn't just the money. It was the math that screamed louder than she ever could. He's not coming back. He planned for this. And you never saw it coming. She stayed on that floor long enough for the espresso machine to time out. The kitchen went dark again. And outside? Nobody came knocking. 3 days later, Teresa opened her front door to find a small brown package sitting dead center on the welcome mat. No return label. No postage. No handwriting. Just cardboard, perfectly creased, taped with quiet precision. The kind of precision she used to mock me for. She stared at it like it might hiss. At this point, the house was hollow. Most of the furniture was hers, yes, but it looked different now. Her designer couch sagged more. The marble countertops were too clean, too unused. Every polished corner reminded her of the person who used to make the place feel anchored. She carried the package to the kitchen, set it down like defusing a bomb, and opened it with a steak knife. Inside, a burner phone still powered off. A printed photo. Glossy. From a decade ago, our first vacation. I'd taken it on a beach in Tulum. Teresa was barefoot, mid-laugh, a little drunk on cheap tequila and sun. I was behind the camera, not in the shot. She used to say that made her sad, said I was always missing from the pictures. I guess she never wondered why. And then there was the note. Typed. Unfolded cleanly. Just one line. You told me I'd crawl back. But you were the one already on your knees. You just didn't know it yet. She read it twice. The third time, her hand trembled. The burner phone buzzed once in her palm as it powered on. No messages. Just the wallpaper, a photo of our house's deed, fully transferred out of her name. Below it, a timestamped notification from the day I'd set it in motion 6 months before she told me I was emotionally safe but sexually beige. She set the phone down and sat. There was nothing to scream about now. Nothing to throw. Even her rage felt late. Like a punch thrown after the lights go out. Across the country, coastal town, off-season quiet, I sat on a weathered bench, finishing a turkey sandwich with too much mustard. Phone on airplane mode. Watching the waves fold over themselves like secrets being erased. A couple walked by, holding hands, laughing about nothing. I nodded at them. Not bitter. Not joyful. Just done. I checked my watch. No calls. No obligations. No one waiting to drain me with performance and critique masquerading as love. I folded the sandwich wrapper neatly, placed it in the trash, and breathed in the ocean. Behind me, the wind shifted. Strong. Cleansing. Some endings don't need applause. They just need silence. And distance. She was already halfway through her second glass of wine when she said it. I had just refilled her water. Hand on the pitcher, napkin still across my lap. Her voice was light, rehearsed, like she'd practiced the line in her head just for this moment. His paycheck's cute. Like a starter pack. And just like that, something inside me stopped. Not snapped. Not cracked. Just stopped. The table erupted. Plinks of cutlery, a chorus of laughter too sharp for the dim lighting. One of her friends actually wheezed. The guy next to her spilled a bit of his martini from laughing so hard. And my wife, looked so proud of herself, like she'd finally been accepted into some sorority of sharp-tongued housewives with Botoxed smiles and least luxury. I didn't say a word. I didn't even blink. I just nodded once, topped off my own glass of water, and looked at the waiter. Check, please, I said. They were too busy laughing to notice how fast he brought it. They definitely didn't notice I tipped him 40%. I stood, helped her with her coat, and walked her to the car like a gentleman. She leaned in on the way home, still buzzed, and said, "You know I was joking, right? You're so sensitive sometimes." I smiled, eyes on the road. Totally. Hilarious. By morning, Three things had happened. The joint checking account was down to $87.24. The shared savings was emptied and reallocated to a trust account in my name only. And I had opened a new personal account, one with no shared access, no paper trail to the house, and absolutely no credit card attached to her purse. It didn't even feel like revenge. It felt like I'd taken a deep breath for the first time in years. And before we go deeper, I need to say this. If you're one of the 98% who watches but hasn't subscribed yet, it would mean everything to me and my small team if you hit that button. We're grinding every day to hit our first 10,000 subscribers, and your support genuinely fuels us to go harder and sharper with every story we tell. Back to her smirk. What she didn't know, and what made her laugh so hard, was that she just handed me the knife. She thought I was too simple, too dependable, too non-threatening to ever push back. That night, she joked with her friends about how I still wore Costco jeans and drove the same truck since '09. What she didn't realize was that every dollar I didn't spend on flash, I spent on making sure she never saw the cliff coming. And no, it was coming. Because behind the calm smile I gave her at the table, behind the gentleman routine, behind the quiet drive home, was a man who'd paid every bill for 19 years. The mortgage, health, insurance, groceries, lawn service, holidays, even her goddamn wine club membership. I'd bought silence for almost 2 decades. She just cashed out the last check with a punchline in a wine glass. What she failed to realize is that a man like me, quiet, steady, unseen, is the worst kind of person to mock publicly. We don't explode. We plan. So when she curled up beside me that night, still giggling in her sleep like the evening was a triumph, I lay there watching the ceiling fan turn and turn and turn. I wasn't thinking about what she said. I was calculating what it would take to make her feel it. The moment she woke up the next morning, I was already sipping my coffee, checking the new account dashboard on my phone. Green everywhere. She came down, yawning, kissed my cheek. "You're up early." I shrugged. "Just organizing things." She didn't even notice the box on the floor by the kitchen table, our old tax folders. Statements. Utility bills. Everything she never touched. She poured her coffee, hummed to herself. And I realized she had no idea she'd already lost. The next time she handed a card to a cashier, it would flash a red error. And the smile on my face? That wasn't revenge. That was freedom. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the first crack showed. She was at a boutique in the West End, one of those places with fluorescent lighting, minimalist hangers, and price tags that screamed, "Divorce someone for this." She picked out a pair of shoes that looked like the love child of an Italian loaf and a spaceship and swiped her card. Declined. She laughed politely. "That's weird," she said to the teenage cashier who couldn't care less. Tried again. Declined. "Must be something with the bank," she mumbled, before pulling out her phone and pretending she had urgent texts. She left the shoes on the counter. That was the first little sting. 2 days later, brunch with friends. Same circle from that dinner. Same performative laughs. She reached for the check this time, trying to reassert her financial dominance after that awkward boutique moment, and her card blinked red again. Declined. This time, in front of everyone. "I think Chase is having issues," she announced, eyes darting. Her voice was sharp at the edges, trying to laugh through it. One of the girls, Vanessa, raised an eyebrow. Again. She nodded stiffly. "Yeah, glitch or something." Only it wasn't. Not a glitch. Not even close. Then came Thursday. She swiped into her gym, the fancy one with eucalyptus towels and someone always refilling cucumber water, and nothing. The keycard light stayed red. The gate didn't move. "Try again," the guy behind the desk said. She did. Still red. He scanned the screen. "Looks like your account is inactive, ma'am." "What?" "That can't be right," she snapped, suddenly aware of how many lululemon-clad women were behind her. "I'm just telling you what it says." She left. Didn't even do her rage Pilates. By Friday, the credit card company finally called. Friendly tone. Just a courtesy check-in about some unusual transfer activity. A polite way of saying, why did thousands of dollars vanish overnight from accounts that haven't moved in years? She hung up and called him immediately. Straight to voicemail. Then again. Same. By the third call, she stopped leaving messages. Just paste. When she pulled into the driveway that evening, she half expected chaos. Maybe mail on the floor. Maybe a notice taped to the door. Instead, the house was pristine. Too pristine. Like it was frozen in time. He was in the kitchen. Calm. Making coffee. Pour over, like he always did. Meticulous. She walked in, eyes scanning him like a detective in a crime scene. Something's wrong with the accounts. He looked up, almost cheerful. Is there? My card was declined twice. And my gym, she stopped short, realizing how ridiculous that sounded. He took a sip. Everything's where it should be. What does that mean? I moved the money I earned. Figured it was time to simplify. Too many shared logins. Too many assumptions. There was no bite in his voice. No anger. Just precision. Like a surgeon delivering bad news without blinking. She stared at him. That's not how this works. He raised an eyebrow. Really? There was silence. For once, she had no script. No witty retort. No line for her friends. Just a tightness behind her eyes she didn't fully understand yet. A feeling that something she never imagined, was happening. And it was already too late to undo. By Saturday morning, the car insurance company left a voicemail. Calm and professional, the kind that almost makes the message worse. We attempted to process your monthly payment. Unfortunately, the transaction was unsuccessful. Please update your payment method to avoid interruption in coverage. She stared at the phone like it was a glitch in reality. Tried logging into the joint account to check. Access denied. She blinked. Tried again. Wrong credentials. Tried the second bank. The one they used for shared expenses. The account she swore was her safety net if things ever went sideways. Account not found. She drove to the branch. Told the teller her name. The woman squinted politely at her screen. I'm sorry. I'm not seeing you listed on this account. Would you like me to verify with the primary holder? Her mouth went dry. No. She left. That night, her club autopay failed. They sent an email. Then a call. Then a lockout from the members-only portal. No more yoga with a view. No more Tuesday wine tastings where she bragged about managing the finances. By Sunday, the panic she tried so hard to keep buttoned up exploded. He was on the back patio, reading. She stormed out barefoot, hair half pulled back, phone in one hand like a weapon. Are you seriously doing all this over one joke? He looked up, blinking slow. Calm as glass. Is that what you think this is about? You're overreacting. I was joking. That's what we do. We tease each other. No. You mock. I tolerate it. She stared. So this is about your ego? He put the book down. No. It's about clarity. I realized something, and it's been a long time coming. Which is, you think I'm replaceable. A reliable utility. Like a water heater. Unseen. Underappreciated. But God help you when it breaks. That landed. Hard. Her face twitched. She snatched a glass off the patio table and threw it. Full force. Shattered against the wall. He didn't flinch. Just walked past her into the house. Came back with a folder. Old, thick, and well-organized. Laid it gently on the table between them. This, he said, is every bill I've paid since we got married. Health insurance. Mortgage. Groceries. Vacations. The down payment for your mother's car. The hospital bill when your sister stayed with us. Every single one. She didn't move. He opened the folder. Showed her rows of printed statements, highlighted transactions, annotated summaries. 18 years and 11 months of quiet, invisible labor. She reached for the final page. A single sentence, typed in bold, center-aligned. Love is trust. Laughter is revealing. Below that, in his handwriting. Thank you for revealing. She didn't say a word. For once, the queen of social performance had no monologue, no deflection. Just silence. And the faint sound of glass crunching beneath her foot as she backed away. By Monday morning, she was in full PR mode. Tapped into every contact she had. Called her lawyer before even brushing her teeth. Pacing barefoot across the tile, she spewed her version of events. Financial abuse, spiteful retaliation, frozen funds, all the buzzwords. He listened. Then asked a simple question. Do you have access to any accounts in your name only? That stopped her. She did. Plenty. But that wasn't the point, she snapped. He was destabilizing her life. He's trying to make me look like a gold digger. There was a pause on the other end. A shift in tone. Are you? She ended the call. Across town, while she was spinning her narrative, he was building his case, quietly, methodically, like he always did. His first move wasn't to retaliate. It was to protect. He called the bank's fraud department, laid out a detailed map of potential account manipulation, flagged every asset they once shared, froze anything with his name attached, reported her prior transfers as requiring review due to suspected misrepresentation. They didn't question it, because his records? Impeccable. He'd never missed a payment, never bounced a check, never asked for a credit extension. He was every banker's dream, consistent, boring, and now terrifying. Then he made his second call to a forensic accountant. Not just any spreadsheet cowboy, but a former IRS auditor he'd met during a subcontracting gig years ago. They'd shared coffee, mutual loathing of bureaucracy, and a dark sense of humor. Still hunting ghosts in spreadsheets? He asked. Depends. You offering a corpse? I'm offering a paper trail. And oh, was there a trail? Because over the last 6 years, his wife had been reallocating funds, masking them as portfolio diversifications, transferring small sums from joint accounts into so-called shared ventures, then moving them again into her name-only securities. Quiet, precise, and to her completely untraceable. She underestimated 2 things. That he'd ever look. That he'd understand what he was looking at. But he'd spent years reading her. And now he was reading statements like a murder mystery. And the twist? Her new bestie. The one with the loudest laugh at that humiliating dinner. The one who called him adorable between sips of overpriced Riesling? Former CPA. Suspended license. Burned out after a decade in corporate audits. And owed him a favor. Years ago, he'd helped the guy out of a nasty lease dispute. Drafted letters. Negotiated the terms. Never charged a dime. You ever need something? He'd said back then. I got you. Well, that moment had arrived. One quiet lunch later, he had insights no regular accountant could have sniffed out in time. Offshore hints. Dummy corporations. Old shell entities recycled under new names. Things no divorce lawyer would ever look for, but a disillusioned CPA? That man smelled blood in Excel rows. By Wednesday, he had a binder. Tabulated, cross-referenced, annotated. Evidence, dates, signatures, and just for flavor, screenshots from her own emails. Forwarded documents, instructions, careless CCs. He didn't throw it in her face, didn't even hint at it. He just left it on the kitchen counter, casually labeled Q1 discrepancies. She saw it when she came home that evening, didn't dare open it, just stared at it like it might explode. Because by now, she was starting to understand something deeply unsettling. He had never raised his voice, because he never needed to. It didn't happen all at once. That's what made it worse. The unraveling came in layers, quiet, invisible at first, like a leak behind drywall. A canceled lunch here, a rescheduled spa day there, the subtle drop in emojis in the group chat. Her phone wasn't lighting up as much. The girls who used to call her Queen under every Instagram post started double-tapping without commenting. And then, not even that. It clicked one morning when she checked her story views. Mira, Vanessa, Lacey gone. No likes. No hearts. No yes girl. She brushed it off as just the algorithm. But even she didn't believe that. The truth was out, in whispers. Somewhere between Pilates and poolside rows. Word had spread. She wasn't who she said she was. Not financially. Not personally. The woman who once bragged about never needing to check a price tag was now fumbling her way through brunch with prepaid visas and hoping no one noticed the split-second delay between her laugh and everyone else's. Then came the party. She tried to reclaim some ground, host a wine night, sent out the texts, rented glassware, ordered catering. When the invoice hit her inbox, she clicked Pay Now, smiling as she imagined the evening's photos. Card declined. She tried another. Declined. Called the vendor. Asked if they'd accept Venmo. They didn't. She canceled the order. Claimed she had food poisoning. No one responded with feel better. A few didn't even see the message. She stood in her kitchen that night, staring at the fridge like it had betrayed her. Then she cracked. Picked up her phone. Called him. Not screaming. Not angry. Begging. I get it, okay? You made your point. Just, please stop embarrassing me. This is cruel. He was quiet for a moment. She could hear him sip something. Tea maybe. Then he said, voice level and even. I'm not doing anything. Yes, you are. People are talking. I'm not talking to anyone. I just stopped funding the show. Silence. Then a click. Call ended. She stood there, trembling. She never imagined herself the kind of woman who'd need someone. But now, stripped of the scaffolding he'd quietly held up for 2 decades, she was exposed, naked under fluorescent light. The next morning, in a move of desperation disguised as decorum, she called her mother. Whined. Complained. Painted herself the victim in broad, sloppy strokes. He's shutting me out, Mom. He's turning everyone against me. Her mother didn't say much, just promised to look into it. That night, her mother did call him. He answered on the second ring. Hello. This is Susan, her mother said, measured and tight. I'd like to understand what's going on. She's saying. He didn't let her finish. Ask her how much she's been lying. I'll wait. There was a pause. Sharp inhale. Then he hung up. No follow-up. No apology. Just silence. And that silence, ironically, made more noise than any accusation ever could. Mira had always been her confidant. Not just a friend, her mirror, her sounding board, her keeper of secrets. They'd shared champagne-fueled nights and whispered confessions, built on years of trust, or so she thought. So when Mira texted out of the blue, lunch? Just us. She didn't think twice. They met at a quiet bistro uptown. White linen. No crowds. The kind of place where uncomfortable truths can be shared behind tasteful silverware and neutral jazz. Mira was already there, hands folded over her phone like she didn't want to touch it anymore. She smiled, tight. You look tired. She forced a laugh. I've been dealing with some financial static. Mira didn't laugh back. Didn't even blink. They ordered. Salad for her. Just water for Mira. Then, without preamble, Mira said, I know about the account. The fork stopped halfway to her mouth. What account? Mira didn't flinch. In the shelf fund. You used my lawyer, remember? You had me help you sign the incorporation documents. Dummy LLC. That little emergency reserve in the Caymans. Her throat closed. Mira went on. You said it was just a precaution. In case he ever got boring. Your words. She tried to smile. Mira, that was years ago. He reached out. The words hung in the air like a suspended blade. Her entire body went cold. He what? 3 weeks ago. Asked me about some old financial moves you made. Said he was trying to make sense of a strangely organized household portfolio. Very calm. Very polite. She didn't speak. Just stared at her water glass like it might offer an escape hatch. I didn't say anything at first, Mira continued, lowering her voice. But then he mentioned dates, transaction times, amounts, offshore identifiers, things I didn't even remember. Her lip quivered. He has everything. No, he couldn't. He does. Even the offshore detail, the blind trust, the escrow movements, all of it. She started shaking, not visibly, but her hand on the napkin had gone pale from how tight she clutched it. Mira leaned forward, voice barely audible now. And he's not angry. That's the scary part. She blinked hard. Mira added, almost apologetically, you married a guy who never yelled. Didn't complain. Just observed. All those years, you thought he was passive. But you were building a sandcastle in the tide. And now the water's rising. She pushed her chair back suddenly. I have to use the restroom. Didn't wait for a reply. She barely made it to the stall before the tears came, hot, ugly, raw. She sat on the closed toilet seat, face in her hands, shaking. The kind of cry that doesn't even make sound at first. Just a physical unraveling. She had always thought secrets gave her leverage. She never imagined they'd become her cage. And now? The walls were closing in, not with a bang, but with calm, clinical precision. She wasn't supposed to be home yet. Her Pilates class ran late on Thursdays, followed by her routine green juice, a scroll through curated affirmations, and then maybe a passive-aggressive call to her mother. That was the rhythm, predictable, polished, hollow. But that day, something itched under her skin. An instinct. Maybe it was Myra's voice still echoing. Maybe it was the eerie silence from the friends who once made her feel untouchable. Maybe it was the look her barista gave her, like he knew something she didn't. She skipped the juice. Drove home. The house was too quiet. No music. No blender. No distant hum of the dryer he always ran right before she remembered laundry existed. She stepped inside and instantly felt it. The weight in the air. The absence of distraction. Then she saw him, standing at the foot of the stairs, a single suitcase by his side. Not the big ones. Not the dramatic kind you pack in when you're trying to send a message. No. Just one. Compact. Efficient. Chosen. She froze. What are you doing? He zipped it shut. Packing. Where are you going? He didn't answer. You can't just leave. That's when he turned. And his face, it wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was worse. It was free. Sure I can, he said. I've already been gone for years. You just didn't notice. Her mouth opened, closed. She tried to summon the rage. The script. The how dare yous. But all that came out was, "Are you going to ruin me?" He tilted his head, studied her for a second, then said, with all the weight of inevitability, "No, you'll do that yourself. I'm just stepping out of the way." She stepped forward, desperate now. "We can fix this. You're just upset. This is a phase. You're not thinking clearly. I've never seen things more clearly." She looked at the bag again, then at him. "Where will you go?" "Somewhere honest." The sentence hit like a slap, but he said it with gentleness, like someone setting down a glass instead of smashing it. He walked past her. No ceremony. No dramatic pause on the threshold. No suitcase wheels echoing like a movie. Just his hand on the knob. A moment. Then the door opened. And closed. Not a slam. Not a bang. Just a sound that said, "You were never listening. But now, you'll hear everything in my silence." She needed to prove she was still in control. That was the mission. So she pulled out the red heels, sprayed the expensive perfume, and texted the old crew, Vanessa, Lacey, Mira, inviting them for one of those nights we used to have. She needed the optics, needed to remind them, and herself, that the throne hadn't crumbled, just got dusty. Reservations were made. A table for 4 at Solace, a rooftop place where dinner cost more than her first car. She wore her diamonds, the ones he gave her on their 10th anniversary. Irony was just another accessory now. They toasted under string lights and laughed too loud, too fast, like women performing joy instead of feeling it. By the time appetizers arrived, she was almost convincing. Almost. "Wine list, ladies?" The waiter smiled. She took charge. "The 17 Emerone. The good one." Nods all around. He returned 10 minutes later with a pleasant face, but something behind the eyes. That little flicker of discomfort they try to hide during awkward moments. "I'm so sorry. Your card's been declined." She blinked. Smiled too wide. "That's odd. Try this one." She handed over another. He disappeared again. The table kept quiet. Then he returned. "Second card. Declined." This time, her laugh was shorter. "A bark, really? There must be some issue with the bank. I've been traveling." Mira turned to her, slowly. Not smug. Not cruel. Just solemn. She leaned in, gently touched her arm. "You might want to call him." The air left the table. Vanessa looked away. Lacey sipped her water. Even the waiter, trained in elegance, practiced in customer discretion, stood frozen, unsure whether to speak or vanish. She froze. The words hung there, sharp and quiet. Not shouted. Not dramatic. Just surgical. Mira leaned back, expression unreadable. Her tone hadn't been sarcastic. It was pitying, and that made it worse. Her hand trembled as she reached for her phone, screen lighting up with that default lock screen he never liked, but she never changed. She suddenly felt naked. Not from the dress, not from the glances around the room, but from the realization. Everyone knew, not just that she'd lost access, but that he had taken it. Calmly, strategically, without a single raised voice. And he hadn't just taken the money. He had taken the illusion, and left her performing alone, spotlight on, audience gone. She waited until after midnight. The restaurant debacle had left a bruise, not just on her ego, but on her very identity. She used to be the woman people envied. Now she was the punchline. A cautionary tale in expensive heels. Mira hadn't returned her texts. Vanessa left her on read. Lacey posted a picture of dessert without tagging anyone. A passive-aggressive exile, if there ever was one. So she poured herself a glass of leftover Merlot, stared at the glowing screen in the dark kitchen, and finally caved. She dialed his number. It went straight to voicemail. She called again. Same. A third time. Blocked. Panic climbed up her spine like ice water. So she did something she hadn't done in years. opened her contacts list, and scrolled down to a number she hadn't touched since the mortgage closing. A firm he once mentioned in passing, Hargrove and Associates. She didn't even remember saving it. Her thumb hovered, then tapped. 2 rings. Then a voice. Female. Cool. Unrushed. You've reached the office of Mr. Hargrove's legal team. How may I assist you? Her mouth opened, then stalled. Then I need to speak to him. It's important. Personal. A pause. Then the woman replied, not unkindly, but with granite certainty. Mr. Hargrove is no longer accepting direct communication. If you wish to make a statement or inquiry, please submit it in writing through our office. Click. Not rude. Just final. The dial tone buzzed in her ear like a wasp. She stood there, phone pressed to her cheek long after the line was dead, as if hoping something might unfreeze. Nothing did. The silence after that call wasn't just quiet, it was absolute. And in that stillness, something broke. Not the kind of shattering she could pick up and glue back. The kind that settles deep, becomes part of the walls. At 3:17 a.m., she wandered to the front door and opened the mailbox. Inside was one envelope. No return address. Cream-colored, hand-addressed. Her name. Just her first name. Her stomach dropped. She stepped back into the kitchen, sat down, tore it open. One receipt. Old. Faded. From a coffee shop downtown. A single espresso and a chai latte. $6.18. Underneath, scribbled in his unmistakable handwriting. Back then, your laughter was honest. She dropped it. Not like in the movies. Not some melodramatic gasp or sob. Just a small, involuntary tremor of her fingers as the paper slipped to the floor. She stared at it. At the timestamp, 11:03 p.m., exactly 1 month before they'd moved in together. Back when she laughed because something was funny, not because someone richer was watching. And for the first time since this all began, truly, viscerally, she felt seen. Not adored, not pampered, not provided for. Seen and judged, not by the world, but by the one man who had never needed to raise his voice to devastate her. The final wave didn't crash, it seeped in, quiet and merciless, like a rising tide under a locked door. The first alert came from the bank. Her platinum card, the one she loved to slide across counters with a smirk, had been permanently revoked due to unresolved ownership issues. She called. They transferred her 6 times, then told her, politely, that the primary on the account had filed a removal request. Fully processed. Irrevocable. She wasn't primary. Never had been. Next, the deed. A letter from the county registrar arrived. She was no longer listed as a title holder on the house. Not even partial. Nothing. She stood there in her silk robe, envelope fluttering in her hand, trying to remember when she last signed anything. She hadn't. Because he had. Back when she was too busy planning color schemes for the bathroom renovation and giggling about financial fog with Mira. And then, on a Monday morning like any other, she opened the door to a knock and was greeted by a man in a blazer who asked for her by full legal name. She nodded, dazed. You've been served. Separation papers. Clean. Sharp. Brutal. And stapled to the back, an audit notice. Not just from him. From the state. Somewhere in the fine print was a reference to a flag transfer, a string of shell corporations traced through 3 different states and one shaky offshore account. He hadn't ruined her. He'd merely let the math speak. The audit would take months, maybe years. The friends? Gone. Vanished like champagne bubbles in stale air. Lacey removed her from the WhatsApp group. Vanessa stopped replying. Mira? Blocked her on everything. After sending one last message, don't contact me. He asked, I answered. That's all. Even her mother stopped picking up. Voicemails turned into silence. Silence turned into shame. So she just floated. Until one night, she found herself in the kitchen, phone in hand, fridge humming in the background like a slow metronome of regret. She wasn't hungry. Hadn't eaten much since the cards were pulled and the fridge stopped restocking itself. A single notification lit up her screen. A video. From a group thread she thought she'd been removed from. It was the dinner party. That dinner. Her voice, in perfect clarity. His paycheck's cute. Like a starter pack. Her laughter followed. Crisp. Condescending. Echoing under string lights. She watched it. Then watched it again. And again. She couldn't look away. Her smile. Their laughter. His stillness. How had she never noticed the way he blinked slowly before pouring the water? The way his jaw clenched not in anger, but in calculation? The 8th time she watched it, her thumb hovered to pause. But she didn't. She let it loop. Her legs folded. Back slid down the cold kitchen wall. Phone still in hand. And somewhere between the 10th and 11th replay, she whispered, barely audible over the laughter still coming from her own mouth on screen. I thought he was harmless. But he wasn't. He was just patient. You'll be fine. You never needed much. That's what she said. No trembling lip. No trace of guilt. Just her lacquered fingernail tapping the signature line like it was a menu order. Margaret always had that talent, turning people into background noise when they no longer served her narrative. Dennis didn't speak. Didn't blink. Just signed. His pen scratched across the paper like a quiet eulogy for a marriage that had already decomposed in silence. She handed him a manila envelope with that smug, rehearsed half-smile of hers, the one that always came right before a lie. It held copies of the final decree, itemized asset divisions, notarized betrayal. Everything sealed and settled, just like her. He left without saying goodbye. Not to her. Not to the smug paralegal who'd flirted with her during their second mediation meeting. Not even to the building. Just walked down 3 flights of stairs and out into the sleet like he'd been erased from someone's Christmas card list. His boots left wet ghost prints on the courthouse steps that vanished within minutes. There was no packed suitcase, no storage unit waiting in the wings. Dennis had come into the office with a leather folder under his arm and left with 2 items. A creased, faded photo of them fishing on Lake Elmore, long before the Botox, before the cold bed, before her, and a folded map of the Northwest with a red circle around a place called Barridge Ridge. It looked like a smudge of ink to anyone else. But to Dennis, it was the first honest thing he'd looked at in months. No one asked him where he was going. No one followed. No one cared. Margaret, of course, had taken everything else. The ring, his grandmother's. The house, refinanced under her name during one of those you don't understand mortgages lectures. Even the damn wedding china, though she hadn't cooked in it since Bush was in office. She told friends he hadn't fought for any of it. He just gave up, she said between wine sips. Didn't even try to argue. They all nodded like it made perfect sense. But what they didn't know, what Margaret never once considered, was that Dennis didn't walk out of that building as a broken man. He walked out like a surgeon leaving a failed operation. No panic. No second-guessing. Just a quiet click as the doors shut behind him. Back in his truck, he unfolded the map on the passenger seat and smoothed it down with one hand. The ink had bled slightly from years of sweat and pressure, but the circle was still visible. A place with no internet, no HOA, no lawn gossip. Just trees, cold air, and the kind of silence that doesn't judge you for being alone. That night, he slept in a rest stop off Route 90, one hand under the seat where the photo and the map now lived, and the other over his chest like he was guarding something. Because he was. By morning, the phone was off. The joint accounts were drained on her end. The world had started to forget him. Exactly how he wanted it. The ribs sizzled on the grill while Margaret held court like a damn empress. Hair freshly colored, eyes hidden behind overpriced sunglasses, she floated from guest to guest with a glass of Pinot and a posture that screamed, "Look at me now." Her sisters flanked her like loyal courtiers, lips painted and ready to echo every punchline. The backyard smelled of meat, sunscreen, and self-satisfaction. He was always so simple, Margaret said, laughing louder than she needed to, her hand flicking the air like she was brushing off a speck of dust rather than 23 years of marriage. She held up her left hand and wiggled her fingers. The ring sparkled, not the original one Dennis had saved 3 months' salary to buy, but a new one, bigger, gaudier. Didn't even fight for it. Honestly, I think he was relieved. Her sister, Paula, scoffed. You probably did him a favor. He always looked like he was waiting to be excused from the table. Margaret snorted. I was the table. Laughter. Glasses clinked. Her cousin Randy raised his beer and said, Here's to freedom. You dumped a station wagon and upgraded to a convertible. Cheers all around. Not one of them asked where Dennis was. Not one of them knew he was already 2 states away, sitting on the tailgate of his truck, scribbling figures on a pad of yellow paper while staring at a half-collapsed cabin on a plot of lakefront property just outside a forgotten Montana town. A real estate agent had just walked back to her SUV, confused by his poker face. He hadn't flinched when she mentioned the rotted subfloor or the leaking roof. He just asked if the well was functional and how far the nearest cell tower was. It was exactly what he was looking for. No one there asked about Margaret. No one there knew anything about the divorce or the glittering carcass of a marriage he'd shed like dead skin. In Barrage, the only thing that mattered was cash up front and whether or not you could swing your own hammer. The cabin looked like hell, but it had bones. Real ones. Not the suburban bones of crown molding and granite countertops. These were hand-cut logs and stone laid without mortar. It smelled like sap and ash and something older than betrayal. Dennis ran a hand over the railing and got a splinter. He smiled. Back at the barbecue, Margaret was deep into her second bottle. She'd told the story of the divorce 3 times already. Each version had a little more sparkle, a little more self-righteous editing. In one, Dennis cried. In another, he begged. In the last one, he just sort of wandered off like a confused dog. That line got the biggest laugh. Someone snapped a group photo. Margaret posed, ring forward, jaw tilted just enough to catch the light. She looked radiant. Dennis, 2 states away, was crouched under a broken window, brushing away rodent droppings and wondering how much lumber he could afford after taxes. It never occurred to her that he hadn't lost anything that day at the courthouse. She thought he'd disappeared. He had. On purpose. The town didn't have a welcome sign. Just a rusted-out mailbox leaned against a bent pole where the highway spat you out and gravel took over. Population: 403, if you counted the mayor's 3 dogs. Nobody asked for last names in Barrage. The woman at the gas station just looked at his plates, raised an eyebrow, and said, "You're a long way from Illinois." Dennis nodded, paid cash, and didn't elaborate. He moved into the cabin that same afternoon. It didn't so much sit on the land as it did cling to it, tilted slightly east, like it had been bracing against the wind for decades. The windows were yellowed with age and suspicion. The porch groaned under his weight. Inside, a family of squirrels had made what he assumed was a hostile takeover of the loft. He didn't care. Dennis parked his truck at the edge of the clearing, killed the engine, and just listened. No sirens. No horns. No Margaret shouting from upstairs that he'd forgotten to fold the towels the right way. Just trees. Just wind. And something that sounded suspiciously like possibility. The first night was rough. A spring snowstorm rolled in, and the wind whistled through gaps in the cabin like a choir of angry ghosts. He slept in a sleeping bag on the floor with his back against the largest beam, the old photograph stuffed into the interior pocket of his coat. Margaret had called it their Elmore moment. He'd never told her he hated that trip. She complained the entire time, right up until the photo was taken. Then she smiled like the camera owed her something. The next morning, Dennis started tearing down the rot. It was slow, violent work. Mold under the floorboards. Dry rot in the rafters. A bird's nest inside the chimney. Every crowbar pull echoed like therapy. Every splinter, a confession. Every beam he replaced, a piece of himself he hadn't realized was still angry. No hired help. No blueprints. Just a pencil behind his ear and a dog-eared notebook filled with diagrams, angles, and measurements. He taught himself as he went. YouTube was unreliable this far out, so he relied on trial, error, and the occasional muttered profanity. The locals occasionally offered help, but he always declined with a quiet, "Thanks, I've got it." He built the new walls first, thicker, insulated, sealed with care. No draft would sneak through these. The roof came next, hand-cut shingles from reclaimed barnwood he found 30 miles north. The fireplace was last. It took him 3 weeks, hauling riverstone by wheelbarrow through melting snow, fingers blistered and raw. Each stone, he said, he imagined sealing away another bitter conversation, another empty anniversary card, another, "I'm just tired," from a woman who hadn't touched him in 2 years. And slowly, the cabin changed. The ghosts left. Or maybe, more accurately, he turned them into bricks and beams and made them useful. By the end of month 3, the air inside smelled like cedar and varnish. The hearth caught flames on the first try. He sat on a hand-built bench, drink in hand, and stared into the fire like it might answer something for him. Outside, snowmelt ran in small rivulets down the hill. Inside, the walls no longer echoed. He hadn't spoken to another human in 12 days. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel lonely. He felt unoccupied, like a house finally cleared of squatters. The first thing she said to him was, "That's the wrong damn varnish if you don't want it yellowing by Christmas." Dennis looked up from the can he was holding, halfway through reading the label, and found himself staring at a woman in a faded red flannel, jeans that had clearly survived a dozen painting projects, and hair twisted into a loose bun that hadn't seen a salon in a while and didn't give a damn about it. She didn't apologize for the interruption, just leaned on the opposite shelf and crossed her arms like someone with tenure in life. "You building furniture or sealing regrets?" she asked, her voice like gravel and dry oak. "Shelving," he said after a pause. "Then you'll want this," she said, plucking another can off the shelf with a thunk. "Won't yellow. Water-based. Good if you're sealing pine or alder. I'm guessing you're not springing for walnut." Dennis raised an eyebrow. "Do I look like a walnut guy?" "You look like a man who hasn't had coffee with company in a while," she replied. "Or a good night's sleep." He blinked, then smirked despite himself. "You work here?" "On the place," she said. "Nancy, don't try to flirt your way into a discount. It never works." "I wasn't flirting." "Then you're even more interesting." She handed him the varnish, grabbed a notepad from the front counter, and started sketching shelf brackets like it was the most natural thing in the world. "What's the load weight you're thinking?" she asked. "Books? Tools? Boxes full of emotional baggage." Dennis stared at her. "Are you always this subtle?" "God, I hope not," she said. "Boring people live longer, but they're hell at parties." They ended up talking for 20 minutes by the paint aisle. He learned she'd been running the shop for a decade since her husband died. Didn't remarry. Didn't care to. She kept the store because it gave her something to fix that didn't talk back or sleep with its tennis instructor. Nancy didn't ask where he was from, just asked what kind of wood he was working with. When he admitted he was using reclaimed barn siding, she nodded approvingly and said, "You've got good bones, then. I assume you're talking about the cabin." "Sure," she said, but didn't look away. 2 days later, she showed up at the cabin in an old pickup with a few offcuts of cherry wood and some L brackets he'd forgotten. Claimed she was just passing by. He didn't point out that she lived 15 miles in the opposite direction. They drank coffee on the porch while she told him about the county's ridiculous zoning laws and how the mayor once tried to outlaw goats because his neighbors had better lawn care than his wife. Dennis laughed, actually laughed, and something in his chest loosened just enough for breath to come easier. She didn't stay the night. But the next week, she brought pie. The week after that, she helped install shelving, critiquing his drill technique and casually tossing him screws like they'd been building together for years. Dennis didn't ask her to come over. She just did. Like moss growing on stone, quiet, uninvited, and exactly what the landscape needed. The hearth caught flame with a single strike of the match, and for a moment Dennis just stood there, fingers still curled around the spent stick, eyes reflecting the small, deliberate fire. It had been 6 months to the day since he first stepped into the collapsed ruin that used to be a hunting cabin. Now it looked nothing like it had. It breathed. Cedar panels ran clean and smooth along the interior, stained a warm honey that glowed in the firelight. The knots in the wood reminded him of old eyes, watchful, patient, wiser than their age. Nancy said the walls smelled like resilience. Dennis thought they smelled like something he hadn't had in years. Peace. The floor was real hardwood now, sealed and sanded smooth, covered only with one thick wool rug near the fire that Nancy insisted gave the room anchor. She had a thing about rooms needing emotional geometry. He never asked what that meant. He just let her rearrange the chairs until she smiled and said, "Now it feels less like a divorcee's panic room and more like a damn home." The fireplace was the soul of the place. He built it stone by stone, the mortar set with bruised knuckles and hours of slow silence. It cracked a little on the left side. He liked that. Gave it character. Nancy told him it gave him character. He told her he already had enough of that. "Thank you." And she laughed like a woman who didn't laugh easily anymore. The table in the center was his final project. 6 feet long, hand-built from repurposed maple, smoothed to a sheen and finished with the same varnish Nancy had bullied him into buying months earlier. Every time he ran his hand over it, he thought about the version of himself who'd stood in aisle 4 pretending to know what the hell he was doing. Now he did. Or close enough. Nancy was placing candles along the table, humming something tuneless and soft. Her flannel sleeves were rolled to her elbows, and her hair was pinned up with what looked suspiciously like a screwdriver. She brought over venison stew in a Dutch oven and muttered something about the meat being a little aggressive, but honest. Dennis laid out 2 plates, the good ceramic one she'd found in a thrift store, and insisted on gifting him despite his protest. "You can't eat new food on old paper plates," she'd said. "That's like patching a sinking ship with chewing gum." Wine was poured. Music, somewhere between blues and gospel, floated through the open window. The air outside was cold, but the kind of cold that reminded you were alive. Inside, everything glowed. Dennis sat down across from Nancy and looked around the room. He didn't say it out loud, but in his mind, clear as the chime of her laugh echoing across the table, he thought, "This is mine. Not borrowed, not begged, not negotiated. Mine. No Margaret. No lawn care schedule. No forced smiles at charity functions or sideways insults dressed as compliments. Just cedar, stone, fire, and her." Nancy caught him looking and raised an eyebrow. "You planning to say grace, or are we just diving in?" He smiled. "I'm still deciding if this is real." She grinned back. "Fake doesn't smell like this." The candles flickered. The fire popped. Outside, wind scraped softly at the eaves like it wanted in on the secret. And Dennis, for the first time in years, wasn't waiting for something to fall apart. He was watching it come together. Margaret was halfway through uploading a filtered shot of her brunch mimosa when her phone buzzed. She didn't look right away. Her thumb still hovered over the brightness slider while she debated whether #FreedomTastus better or #NewBeginnings had the more smug aesthetic. The phone buzzed again, then a third time. Finally, she sighed and glanced at the screen, expecting another group chat meme from Paula. It was from her niece, Sophie, the one with the Subaru and the emotional support terrier. Sophie saw a cabin near Berridge Ridge. Thought I saw Dennis with someone. Margaret stared at it, blinked, and read it again. Berridge Ridge. Dennis with someone. Her finger froze mid-swipe, like her phone had turned into a dead fish in her hand. She frowned, not out of concern, but sheer irritation, as if the universe had dropped gum on her cashmere rug. She hadn't heard that name in months. Dennis. He vanished so completely after the divorce that she sometimes wondered if he'd faked his own death just to avoid splitting the airline miles. The thing that gnawed at her now wasn't the idea that he was still alive. Of course he was. Rats were resilient. It was the phrase "with someone." Who? What kind of someone? She chuckled to herself and tossed the phone onto the couch cushion. "Probably some grizzled logger who sells jerky and smells like pine tar," she muttered, mostly for her own benefit. The idea of Dennis rebounding with a woman who wore Carhartt jackets and baked pies was absurd. Still, she didn't return to Instagram right away. Instead, she poured another splash of Prosecco into her glass, leaned back in her mid-century leather armchair, and picked up the phone again. Scrolled to Paula's number. "Hey," she said when her cousin answered. "Weird question. Do you remember where Dennis said he was headed after the divorce?" A pause. Then Paula laughed. "Honey, he didn't say anything. He ghosted harder than your third husband." "Why?" Margaret hesitated. "Sophie said she saw him. In Montana." "Oh, Jesus. That man wouldn't last 2 weeks without a target and an oil diffuser." "Apparently, he was at a cabin," Margaret added, feigning disinterest. "With a woman." Paula went quiet for a beat. "What, like, living there?" "Sophie just said she thought it was him," Margaret said quickly. "Could have been a mountain man or, I don't know, someone who looks like him. I mean, there's probably 1,000 retired unshaven sad sacks rebuilding cabins and crying into soup." "Sure," Paula said, slowly. "Still, weird timing." Margaret's eye twitched. Weird timing? Why did that bug her? Dennis was Dennis. A walking beige sweater of a man. He didn't do timing. He did spreadsheets. He did standing in the grocery store aisle comparing olive oil prices for 12 minutes. He didn't just move on. And definitely not with someone else. Right? Margaret waved her hand like she was batting away a mosquito. Let him play lumberjack with whatever Montana librarian had mistaken him for a wounded bird. She had wine, Wi-Fi, and a yoga instructor named Kyle who did things with his hands that Dennis would have needed a diagram for. Still, later that night, as she lay in her silk sheets with her laptop propped on her knees, Margaret did something she hadn't done in over 6 months. She typed Berridge Ridge, Montana into Google. And then, a few seconds later, she opened Zillow. "Just curious. Just a little detour," Margaret said, smoothing down her scarf as the SUV crawled up the gravel road. Her cousins, Paula and Randy, exchanged a glance but said nothing. They'd been looped into this casual drive 2 hours earlier, lured by the promise of a winery tour and charcuterie, not a sudden veer off the main highway toward what looked suspiciously like a hermit's compound. "Montana's full of surprises," Margaret chirped, tapping the GPS off like it had served its purpose. "Thought it'd be fun to see if that rumor had any legs." Rumor. She said it like it was a joke, but her fingers had been drumming the steering wheel for the last 15 minutes, and she hadn't blinked much since they passed the last mailbox 5 miles back. The gravel thinned to ruts. Pines leaned in closer. And then, just as the sun began to bleed into the treetops, the cabin came into view. It was unmistakable, tucked into the rise of the ridge, warm light spilling from the windows like it had nothing to hide. A soft plume of smoke curling from the stone chimney. Clean lines. Solid craftsmanship. No clutter. No chaos. Margaret's stomach twisted. She'd expected what? A tent? A tarp? Maybe some ramshackle shack cobbled together with desperation and middle-aged grief? Not this. Not something that looked like a magazine cover for Reclaim Dignity Monthly. Dennis had never had a design bone in his body. He once thought a lava lamp counted as mood lighting. This was curated. Intentional. Warm. The cousins were quiet. Margaret cleared her throat and smirked, adjusting her sunglasses even though dusk had already stolen the sun. "No harm in checking," she said again, a little tighter this time. "Maybe it's not even him." They got out. The air smelled like pine and wood smoke, not diesel and driveway sealant. Margaret wrinkled her nose. She hated the woods. They always made her feel like she was about to be judged by a pine cone. They stepped onto the porch. The wood didn't creak. Before she could knock, the door opened. And there he was. Dennis. Hair a bit longer, streaked with silver. Beard trimmed, but not manicured. Wearing a thermal Henley that actually fit. He didn't look surprised. Or angry. Or even smug. He looked settled. Margaret blinked. For a second, she almost didn't recognize him. This wasn't the man who used to hover at the edge of her conversations like a loyal Labrador, waiting to be summoned. This man wasn't waiting for anything. "Margaret," he said, like it was a neutral weather report. "Hi," she replied, that smile of nostalgic superiority creeping back in as she took a deliberate step forward. "We were just passing through. Thought we'd say hello." Behind her, Randy muttered something about GPS malfunctioning. Paula shifted awkwardly. Dennis held the door, his hand steady on the frame. Inside, they could hear the soft crackle of firewood. Something simmered, stew maybe? Music played low in the background, not classical like Dennis used to tolerate for her sake, but something bluesy, something with a soul. He didn't move to invite them in. Margaret tilted her head. "Nice place." "Unexpected." Dennis shrugged. "I built it." "You? Really?" She laughed, one perfectly plucked eyebrow arched. "You always hated power tools." "I had time to learn." A flicker of heat lit her cheeks, though she masked it with a laugh. "Well, this is something." A voice called from inside. "Dennis? Did you grab the wine?" And then footsteps. Female. And the sound of another chair scraping across wood. Margaret's grin twitched. Dennis didn't say anything. He just turned his head slightly toward the warmth behind him and said over his shoulder, "We've got company." Then he looked back at her, not unkindly, but with something worse than disdain. Indifference. And held the door open, just wide enough to let them see, but not enough to walk through. The scent hit first, rosemary, garlic, something slow-cooked and confident. It didn't smell like survival food or a man fumbling with frozen dinners. It smelled like home, like someone had planned this. Margaret stepped forward hesitantly, peering past Dennis into the cabin. She had expected dust, tools, maybe a lone cot, and a pile of wood waiting to be chopped. Instead, she was greeted by candlelight glinting off wine glasses, a flickering fire in the hearth, and a table so deliberately set it might have been pulled from a food magazine spread titled Rustic Elegance. At the far end of the kitchen, Nancy turned. She had that annoying glow of someone who was both grounded and amused by other people's discomfort. Hair tied up casually, sleeves rolled, a dark apron dusted with flour. She held a ladle in one hand like it was a scepter, steaming stew dripping back into a cast iron pot. When she saw them, her face lit up, not with surprise, but with hospitality so smooth it felt like mockery. "Oh," she said with a smile, as if Dennis had mentioned them over breakfast. "Company?" Dennis didn't answer. The cousins hesitated just behind Margaret, unsure if this was an ambush or a mistake. Paula squinted at the set table, 2 places already filled with food, napkins folded, wine poured, the kind of setup that says, "You were not expected." Nancy wiped her hands on a dish towel and nodded toward the table. "We were just about to eat. You all hungry?" There was no sarcasm in her voice. That's what made it worse. Margaret's eyes swept the room. There was a bowl of roasted vegetables, a small loaf of bread already sliced, 2 side dishes she couldn't immediately name, one of them garnished with herbs. Real plates. Cloth napkins. Dennis had never once used cloth napkins in their 23 years unless someone died or retired. Her gaze landed on the 2 wine glasses. One had a lipstick mark. Nancy's. Margaret felt something catch in her throat. She masked it with a sharp, airy laugh. "You've really gone full mountain man." Dennis tilted his head. "Unreadable. I like it up here." Nancy, still stirring, said, "Took a while to get the oven temperature right with elevation, but he's getting the hang of it." Margaret's smile twitched at the corners. "You cook?" Dennis shrugged. "We trade off." "We." That word clanged in her ears like a dropped dish. Nancy gestured toward the table. "I hope this isn't awkward. We don't get many visitors." She looked genuinely pleased. Nice to finally put faces to the family stories. Margaret opened her mouth to respond, but nothing elegant came out. The silence was thick. Paula stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable. "Wow, this place is really something. You did all this yourself?" "I had help," Dennis said. Nancy met his eyes. Just a flicker. But it was enough. That single look carried weight. Shared history. Maybe a joke. Maybe something more. It was private, and Margaret knew it. Not because they were showing it off, but because they didn't need to. Margaret looked down at the table again. There wasn't space for 3 more seats. Not without rearranging everything. And no one moved to make space. The realization crawled up her spine. She wasn't walking into a scene frozen in time, where she could swoop in and shake off the dust. She was walking into a new script, one where her lines had been cut entirely. For a moment, her legs betrayed her, rooted just inside the doorway while the warm hum of this strange life pressed in around her. The fire crackled. The stew simmered. Nancy returned to stirring as if they weren't even there. As if Margaret was just a shadow on the porch someone forgot to close the door on. Dennis picked up the second wine glass, took a sip, then looked her dead in the eye. "Hope the drive wasn't too long," he said. She didn't answer. "Because what do you say when the man you discarded builds a better world without you, and doesn't even flinch when you try to step back into it?" Margaret lingered just inside the threshold, arms crossed tightly, fingers grazing the silk of her scarf like it was armor. Her voice came low, almost inaudible over the soft clatter of Nancy replacing the ladle on a ceramic spoon rest. "So, this is where you've been." Dennis didn't look up from the chair he was now pulling out for Nancy. He nodded once, slow. "Built it from the ground up." He didn't say alone, but the words hung in the air like timber dust. Nancy, now seated across from him, reached for her glass with the ease of someone who had nothing to prove. "And every nail in this place has a story," she added, smiling faintly, not at Margaret, but at Dennis. The fire snapped. Outside, wind stirred through the trees like a hushed audience waiting for the next act. Paula shifted awkwardly and glanced toward Randy, who pretended to be admiring the mantle, a simple beam of reclaimed wood with a carved edge. No photos. No trophies. Just a single ceramic bowl filled with pine cones. Margaret scanned the room again. Her eyes didn't know where to land. The floorboards were smooth, not like the warped ones in their old house she always meant to have redone. The shelves were filled with books, real ones. Some hardcover. Some worn at the edges like they'd actually been read. One had a folded bookmark. Another had a note card sticking out of it that said, in Nancy's handwriting, page 87, "Ask me about this." Margaret took another breath, shallow and tight. "I thought you hated the cold," she said, trying for lightness but landing somewhere between brittle and pathetic. Dennis shrugged. "Turns out it's better than the quiet that comes from sleeping next to someone who's already left the room." Randy let out a quiet cough, then looked down at his shoes. Margaret smirked. Her go-to mask since high school flickered. She didn't know what to say to that. Because somewhere beneath the snide comments, the practiced flippancy, she felt something else rising. A sharp, unfamiliar unease. This wasn't just a rustic hideout. This was a life. And it wasn't surviving, it was thriving. The walls didn't carry echoes of resentment. The silence wasn't awkward, it was full. The kind of quiet that comes when two people understand each other so well that words become optional. Nancy took a bite of her stew, looked over at Dennis. I told him to go with alder for the cabinets, she said casually. But he insisted on pine. He's stubborn like that. He smirked, just slightly. She was right. I reeded them. Margaret stared at the cabinets. She hadn't even noticed them until now. They were perfect. Flawless, even. They shared that tiny moment, and for Margaret, it might as well have been a freight train slamming through her. Not because they were touching. Not because they kissed or clung or flaunted. Because they didn't need to. They just fit. Paula finally stepped forward, clearing her throat. Honestly, Dennis, this is impressive. Really? I mean, you've done well for yourself. Margaret turned toward her, surprised. Paula never gave compliments without a disclaimer. Dennis inclined his head slightly. Thanks. Another silence followed, but it wasn't Dennis who felt it heavy. It was Margaret. For the first time, she wasn't the one being humored. She wasn't the sinner. She wasn't even part of the constellation anymore. She was a visitor, a relic from a life he'd repurposed into something far better, something cleaner, something earned. And as the fire crackled behind him, warming a space she'd never imagined possible without her in it, Margaret began to understand something she'd never considered. She wasn't here to reclaim anything. She was here to witness what she'd lost. Margaret had turned halfway toward the door, heels clicking against the floor like an anxious metronome, when the sound stopped her cold. A creak from the hallway. Not the fire. Not the wind. Something else. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw movement. A shadow stretching from the back corridor. Slow, steady, deliberate. For a moment, it didn't register. She assumed it was Nancy fetching something or a dog coming to sniff the tension. But then the figure stepped into the room, and her world, already wobbling, snapped. He was older, of course. Thinner. His posture stooped. But the face was unmistakable. The jaw. The eyes. The way he looked at her like time hadn't passed, like he still expected her to explain herself. Dad. Her voice cracked halfway through the word. It was raw, unpolished, stripped of that high-gloss sarcasm she wore like perfume. She took a half step forward before her knees seemed to forget their function. The room dropped 10 degrees. Paula gasped audibly. Randy froze, his mouth hanging open, then slowly turned toward Margaret, eyes wide with a dawning horror. The old man blinked, his expression unreadable. Margaret. Just the name. No warmth. No accusation either. Just a name dragged across decades of silence. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. 20 years since he walked out of her wedding reception without a word. 20 years since he refused to return her calls, never answered letters, never met her eyes when they accidentally crossed paths in town, and he turned his back like she didn't exist. And now here he was. Here, in Dennis's cabin, helping him build fireplaces and eat stew and sip wine while she'd spent the last 2 decades telling anyone who'd listen that he was a bitter ghost, a man too proud to forgive. Dennis didn't turn to look at her. He didn't raise his voice, didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply said he helped build the fireplace. 6 words. Simple. Final. Etched in stone like the hearth behind him. Margaret's mouth trembled. Her father said nothing more. Just stood beside the mantel he helped stack, watching her as if he didn't know whether to feel pity or closure. Nancy gently rose from her chair and walked to Dennis's side, touching his arm, a quiet signal that this moment didn't need commentary. It had already said everything it needed to. Margaret tried to breathe. Her vision blurred, but she blinked it back. Not here. Not in front of them. She turned toward the door, nearly colliding with Paula, who still looked too stunned to process anything beyond the basic fact that the man they thought was dead or gone was here, and he was choosing Dennis. Randy stepped aside, saying nothing. For once. The wind caught the edge of Margaret's coat as she reached the threshold. The trees outside hissed softly, like they were telling secrets behind her back. She crossed the porch in a daze, her heels unsteady on the planks. Didn't even register that the porch light had clicked on, that the world outside was darker now, colder. Behind her, the door hadn't closed yet. Then it did. Soft, deliberate. No slam, no echo, just the gentle finality of something finished. Not broken, not shattered. just complete. And Margaret knew, truly knew, she had not just lost a man, or a house, or a story she once controlled. She had lost the audience. And they weren't waiting for an encore.